The following is a special presentation on TNN, the Nashville Network.
Be careful what you ask for. You just might get it, they say. And 2 weeks ago in Columbus, fans asked for the kind of action they've come to expect from America's premier short track series. And sure enough, they got it. Rootin' and pawing, bumping and banging, hard racing, and fun to watch. And when it was over, a familiar sight in victory lane, too. Toledo Speedway, on the other hand, is a place where you must expect the unexpected, where demons emerge from unlikely hiding places, where in the blink of an eye, defeat can be snatched from the jaws of victory, and the thrill of victory itself isn't felt until the last possible instant. The best short track racing in America resumes as the AC-Delco Challenge Series, stop number 2. The Glass City Classic at Toledo Motor Speedway, our second visit to the state of Ohio. Under beautiful weather conditions, sunny skies will make it a lot more exciting for the fans, a very pleasant day in the grandstands, and a great day of racing for everyone concerned. Hello again, everybody. I'm Brian Drever, along with my friend Rob Albright, and we're heading up towards the front of the field here for the AC-Delco Challenge Series. We got 38 cars lined up and ready to get going here on this very, very unusual racetrack. Rob, a very difficult one for the guys to set up.
Yeah, it is, Brian. It's really almost egg-shaped. We're just walking out of turn number 4. It's a little higher banked, but more narrow than turns 1 and 2. They're a little more shallow, less steeply banked. So the drivers have to determine which end is most important to them. There's a compromise in the setup, and their end will be the secret to success or failure today.
We've got a great mix in the starting field here, too. Some of the older and more experienced drivers, we'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute, but the young guns, the guys that have really done a great job in qualifying here and setting themselves up for a performance that they can be proud of at the end of this Glass City 300 are the guys like Gary St. Amant, Brad Loney, Little Glenn Allen Jr. Those guys are at the front of the field.
Yeah, they're in row number 2. Some surprises which we'll reserve for Ralph Shaheen a little bit later on the front row. But these kids are for real, Brian. They're going to challenge for a title this year.
Now, one of the guys that's had a lot of success here and had an unusual set of circumstances for himself last year here in Toledo is Scott Hansen in the 53.
Scott, well, what can you say about his success last year? He won one race here, and the other race he was leading when he had an on-track incident that took him out of contention and really aggravated an old injury. But he has been tough here. 5 times he's been here, 4 times he's been here, and I think he's been in the top 5 4 times. Only once has he dropped out of a race. 1 win. He's tough here at Toledo.
Well, tough. It was tough for him here last year at the Toledo race. Now, as we said before, we're making our way towards the front of the field, but I don't think we're getting there quite fast enough. So with a miracle of electronics, let's throw it up to Ralph Shaheen. He's already there.
Ryan, 64 times Mike Miller has started an AC-Delco Challenge Series race, but usually it's from back behind me, deep in the field. For the first time in his career, Mike Miller will start the Atlantic Communications Pontiac from the pole position. Mike, what was different about this time here at Toledo that allowed you to get the pole?
Well, Ralph Trickle and I have talked about lots of things, and a couple weeks ago down at Talladega, he suggested that I try something a little bit different, and we did, and here we are.
That's Dick Trickle, of course, that he is talking about. And you know, Brian, it's not surprising to find out that Mike Miller and Dick Trickle put their heads together. These are the two people that worked together and came up with the rules and the configuration to run the 9-to-1 motor that has become so famous in ASA racing.
Thank you, Ralph. And as the field gets ready to go, we want to show you how the points are stacking up right now. Of course, this is based on the results of only one race that last weekend, or 2 weekends ago, in Columbus, Ohio.
They're chasing the black number 88. That's something they've been accustomed to doing over the years. Mike Eddy gunning for an unprecedented 8th national championship, but he can't afford a single slip this year with these young guys like Loney and Glenn Allen Jr., Gary St. Amant, and that cagey old veteran Mike Miller. Remember, he started so strong a year ago. he thinks that they're not going to have the consistency, Brian, that will keep him at the top all year.
After qualifying, these points tightened up a little bit among the top 4, but they're pretty much still in this order. There's Scott Hansen starting sixth after the first race, and of course we've talked about his success here at this racetrack. This was, I think, still in coming here, probably the most exciting and most fun race we did all year last year, out of all due respect to the rest of the races that we had on the AC-Delco Challenge Series in 1994. I'll tell you what, this was a tough act to follow.
Well, one name that you don't see in the top 10 is the name of Dave Sensiba. He was the guy that battled all season with that 9th ranked driver right now, Brian Refner. Sensiba, if you weren't with us a couple of weeks ago at Columbus, started near the front, ran very, very well, and then had some mechanical problems. So he'll start kind of deep. Well, actually, he would have started deep. There was some snafus in the tech line today, and a couple of the drivers thought they were going to be relegated to the tail. So he has been put back in his original qualifying position. But Sensiba, you know, they talk about this sophomore jinx. Hopefully, it's not going to be a thing that will plague him all year.
That was another look there at the pole sitting number 18, the tomato red car of Mike Miller, and the whole field, 38 cars strong, stretched around. Now, we do see a number of the cars out there, and of course out in the starting grid is our Ralph Shaheen, and he's the guy we've been waiting for to get this race going. Ralph?
Ryan, we caught up with Paul Pucci, who's the field sales executive for the folks at AC-Delco. And Paul, you're going to get us started today. How about it?
Yes, sir. Gentlemen, start your engines.
The command to fire the engines for 1995 Class 300 has been given. The front row, Mike Miller and James Saunders will be.
The engines are fired, and we're fired up for the start of the Glass City 300. Join us in just a moment, and we'll get this one going. The 1995 AC-Delco Challenge Series live on TNN is brought to you in part by Win Oil Company, makers of quality automotive car care products. Remember, when it's wins, it works. By your GM Goodwrench service dealer, we want your business. By Goodyear, #1 in tires. By Little Caesars Pizza, where you always get 2 great pizzas for 1 low price. And by Pep Boys Automotive Supercenter. As the field circles the Toledo Motor Speedway here for the Glass City 300, let's run down the starting grid for you. We've touched on a few of them. Let's fill in the rest.
Hey, here's the big surprise. Mike Miller on the pole a little bit, but J.D. Summers, the fastest of 11 qualified rookies in the junior Hanley-owned Ford Quaker State Thunderbird.
And on row number 2, Glenn Allen Jr. in the Eaglewood Construction CarQuest Pontiac ran second last time out. Pink driver suit and all. This week sits on the second row alongside Brad Loney in the number 33 Winnebago Flex Steel H&W Chevrolet. He finished third in Columbus. His best finish last time, his career best qualifying effort this week.
The third row, Bob Seneca in his Johnsonville Foods Ford Thunderbird, and local favorite Todd Forbes from Bryan, Ohio, in the Yoder Ford Maystow Construction Ford Thunderbird.
Pole sitter in Columbus, Gary St. Amand, pilot of the Winsport City Thunderbird, the inside of row 4. 1 spot better than 7-time ASA champion Mike Eddy, who drove the Goodwrench Pontiac to victory in Columbus, setting up a run at title number 8.
The fifth row, the prodigy and the mentor, Eddie Sharp Jr., who is in ASA because of 1993 champion Johnny Benson Jr., who has a Busch Grand National week off, and he's going to come back to challenge his old mates.
Moving a little bit further back through the field, there's Tony Roper. Boy, he had a great run last time, too. We talked about Mike Miller running from 19th to 4th. Tony Roper ran from 25th to 11th. Here's Scott Hansen, Dave Sensiba. Sensiba driving one of 2 Monte Carlos in the race this week.
The 8th row, Matt Hutter, just a youngster driving as a teammate to Glenn Allen Jr. His dad is an ASA engine builder. And Brett Bell, who crashed hard in practice, a very impressive comeback from that for a strong start.
Kidded Joe Knott about borrowing a Valvoline hood from Mark Martin. Well, he's got one on there, and he'll be running hard today with Steve Shive and a Chevrolet back there.
Road racer Bobby Archer and veteran Jay Sauter, who was a factor in this thing a year ago, started row number 10.
And a little bit further back, Brian Refner, rookie contender last year, sits well up in the points. We saw that at the beginning. And Ted Smokestad in the Chevrolet that he's driving there, sponsored by Super America, one of our great sponsors.
The 12th row, Steve Holtzhausen and the Motorsports of Rice Lake Ford and the BASF Finish Master Chevy of rookie Pat Bordeaux. In the 13th row, veteran Harold Fair and rookie making his first start today, Brandon Sperling in the Ultra Custom Wheel Chevy. Harold getting some help from Dana Corporation this weekend. Todd Oliver, the racing insurance guy, along with Rick Beebe, who had to earn his way in with the Last Chance race yesterday, as did some of these other drivers. Tom Jones, Yale Conley, the racing surgeon from Vienna, West Virginia. Bobby Dotter making his first start in some time. Kent Stoff, we're going to be talking about him quite a bit in the Popa Joe's Pizza, brand new sponsor for him, along with Kinetic. Matt Kenseth, Jeff Neal, starting deep. Watch for him to move up early. Rookie Rick Miller, racing veteran Dennis Lampman in the 18th row.
From row 16 back, these were the guys that did not get in either through qualifying or the last chance. They had to get in based on their points from this season.
And we're going racing.
We're getting ready to go green. The flag is in the hand of Roger Slacken, waving, and out they go. And look at Summers making a move on Mike Miller in the very first lap, going down the backstretch now. Mike Miller trying to fight him off. They're side by side on the backstretch, and J.D. Summers was only 1,000th of a second slower in qualifying than Mike Miller. Mr. Inside is on the inside, and J.D. Summers, the rookie's on the outside, going by.
And he's got the lead. You know, I asked him before this race if he had some rookie jitters. He said, no, I probably got as many laps on this track in late model competition as anybody, and it shows as he's taken the lead very, very quickly away from fast qualifier Mike Miller.
Nudging hard up from behind in third spot there, Glenn Allen Jr. in the number 15 machine. And we have got a heck of a race going on. J.D. Summers trying to run off and hide early here. Mike Miller drifting a little bit high, and Glenn Allen's got a fender underneath, so the pole sitter is having a little bit of trouble here in the early going. J.D. Summers in the 22 machine, off and running.
I'll tell you one thing about Mike Miller. Don't be alarmed or concerned that he seems to be dropping back. He normally sets his race car up, Brian, for long runs. He normally is working from deep in the field, and he may be considering that. Glenn may get by him early, but that doesn't mean that Mike's out of contention at this very early stage of the race.
J.D. Summers obviously has the line on this racetrack with all the experience. Even though he is a rookie contender, he's now put about 5 or 6 car lengths on the rest of the pack, led by Mike Miller. Then it's Glenn Allen Jr., the number 33, with the unusual 3-3s on the side of Brad Loney. And we're just a few laps into this race, and already it's single file all the way around the racetrack.
But it's brand parity up front. It's the Ford of J.D. Summers out in front, the Pontiacs of Mike Miller and Glenn Allen Jr., and then the fastest Chevy in ASA, as his press agent likes to say, Brad Loney, operating in 4th position. Todd Forbes now is beginning to close up, and a great battle behind them between Bob Seneker and Mike Eddy for 6th position.
There's the two veterans, Mike Eddy and Bob Seneker on the outside. Gary St. Amant tucked in behind Seneker. That's where he started. Mike Eddy was on the outside. Great quote from Gary St. Amant. Had us laughing down there in the pit. I said, Gary, you kids go out there and have a good time, but have a little respect for your elders. He says, I'm sitting behind Bob Seneker and inside of Mike Eddy, and I got to respect them too.
Gary says this has to be his day. It's the 7th of the month, driving car number 7, started 7th, and his girlfriend Tracy is celebrating her birthday today, so we can't miss.
You know, I heard he was actually sandbagging a little bit to get that number 7 spot, and of course he was fighting the 0-7 of Todd Forbes, who started 6th, so there was a little bit of that number mojo working out there today, and they were all trying to get it.
Well, there is Gary St. Amant now. He's beginning to close up on Bob Seneker. You can see how much gap. Mike Eddy running all by himself, and it's Seneker that's falling back just a little bit in the early going in car number 84.
Well, Mike Eddy has gotten around Bob Seneker and around the outside, of course, of Gary St. Amant. He started there. He's trying to get up to the 5 leaders. J.D. Summers losing a little bit more ground here now. He had really stretched out a lead there for a while, but it appears as though Mike Miller, Glenn Allen Jr., Brad Loney, and Todd Forbes in the 0-7 are all starting to close a little ground, or at least not let him get so far away.
And you could see just a moment ago the Benson machine, Johnny Benson Jr. in the Port City BSA Berger Chevrolet was really beginning to put some pressure on Gary St. Amant in car number 7. There's Mike Miller still hanging on to 2nd position. You won't see any youngster mistakes, if you will. Glenn Allen Jr., Brad Loney, still relatively new in their ASA racing careers, but they're going to be patient. They know there's a long way to go today. They don't need to worry too much. We expect a lot of yellows. That's what we always have here. And Johnny Benson now, Brian, has made his way past Gary St. Amant and Tony Raines, who really felt the pressure for a strong run today after a so-so debut at Columbus with his team. Now he begins to pull up as well in car number 87.
Johnny Benson, of course, the champion of the ASA Series a couple of years ago, has now moved on to the Busch Series and is leading that one. And here he is. Comebacks, this is what he likes to do. Boy, he hangs around here. He's been with Eddie Sharp, helping Eddie out last time around in Columbus. He was just there to help. This time he's out there to race. The teacher and the pupil started side by side, and it looks like the teacher didn't give up quite all of his tricks. He's doing a little bit better right now than Eddie Sharp. Let's go down to Ralph Shaheen. He's got a little extra word about Mike Miller.
Brian, I don't think there's anything to worry about with Mike Miller just yet. I checked with his crew chief. He said Mike hasn't radioed anything in. I think Mike is just pacing himself at this point. In talking to most of the drivers, they said they won't start driving overly aggressive until after the first 50 laps. The first 50 here at Toledo are usually pretty wild. Everybody's going to try to settle down, get a feel for their car, and then really get after it.
Well, we also see that Glenn Allen Jr., neither Glenn Allen Jr. nor Brad Loney making a lot of effort to get around Mike Miller. They just figure that the veteran driver is as good as anybody to follow around. They're just going to let him set the pace. He knows exactly how to do just that. Younger drivers might be a little bit more impetuous than a veteran like Mike Miller, so they're content to sit in behind him, and whatever J.D. Summers does out front, well, they're just going to let it happen.
And hats off early to 11 of 38 starters, rookies here at Toledo, and they're doing a great job early on.
There's Mike Miller. Now, they have not quite started to run into traffic yet. J.D. Summers, on the other hand, is starting to run into a little bit of the tail end of the field there as he makes his way around the 71 of A.J. Cooper and the 98 of Kent Stauffer. And now he's got a little bit of clear track to run in. Clearly, another exciting Toledo Glass City 300 getting set up right here. We're in the early laps, so come on back. Welcome back, everybody. These folks are enjoying a nice sunny day here in Toledo as the Glass City 300 is just underway, and not seconds after we went to commercial break, Tony Roper in the number 10 car just kind of eased on around the side of the track, came to a stop. There he is, sitting in the middle of the racetrack. Rob Albright, tough afternoon, at least right now. Everybody else still moving, he's not.
Yeah, my guess it's electrical. The Childs Tire Snyder Equipment Chevrolet looks like his day may be over. Well, we have a brand new sponsor, a whole host of them in 1995. One of them is one of the most interesting, the National Burn Victim Foundation. And A.J. Cooper carries their colors on his Ford Thunderbird. We talked to him about it last week. A.J., you have a new and rather unusual sponsor for 1995, and I think it involves this little friend you're holding here. What's this all about?
Well, this is for the National Burn Victim Foundation. We're going to try to help them raise some money to buy these bears for children that are burnt. And this is Professor Gaynor, and he heads the foundation, and he can tell you all about it.
Professor Gaynor, tell us just a little bit about the National Burn Victim Foundation. What is its purpose and what's its goal?
Well, I'm the founder of the National Burn Victim Foundation. We're heading into our 21st year, and our goal is that we're an advocate for burn victims, especially children, because a burn is one of the most painful, most traumatic experiences that anyone can sustain. But a child is not a small adult. They're different physiologically, biologically, psychologically. The child grows and is subject to surgical procedure after surgical procedure and pain, pain, pain. And I'll tell you, after all the things that we've done, we've touched thousands of people's lives, but these teddy bears, I tell you, they have magic. Bears do have magic. They have a therapeutic value to the kids. The kids love these bears, and they're making a difference. And I thank AJ and the Racing Association here for helping. God bless them all.
Well, AJ, just one final question. I understand that you at one point were a burn victim, and so you really know firsthand what these things might mean to some young ones.
Yeah, I have a unfortunate experience of being burnt once, and it'll be a big help for them because it is very painful.
Well, it's going to be an exciting year for the National Burn Victim Foundation. It's new association with the ASA AC-Delco Challenge Series, and you got a nice young man here to work with, Professor Gaynor.
We got 50,000 bears to go for kids, so we need a lot of help. Thank you, sir.
Here's the address if you'd like to get involved. The Cooper Morton Racing Team will accept your contributions. 269 Northeast 69 Highway in Claycomo, Missouri, 64119. Help out these young ones. It's quite a good cause. AJ also wanted us to extend his thanks to a couple of guys, Brett Bell and Brian Reffner. He was involved in an accident yesterday, and they provided parts to put car number 71 back together.
We have just gone back to green here, and it is still J.D. Summers, rookie driver in the number 22 car, who is out in front. And veteran Mike Miller, the pole sitter for this Glass City 300, sits in second spot ahead of a couple of the kids, as we call them out there. Glenn Allen Jr. and Brad Loney, two of the younger drivers who, of course, are racing well beyond their tender years, you might say. These guys are veterans behind the wheel, even though they are some of the younger. And then Mike Eddy in the number 88, the good wrench Pontiac, the man in black, is coming. He's there.
It seems like no matter which type of stock car racing you watch, the super speedways down south or the short tracks up here, no matter where those two guys start in those black GM Goodwrench cars, they go right to the front. It's always Earnhardt and somebody in NASCAR, and it's always Mike Eddy and somebody battling in ASA.
We talked about number mojo. I think there's something about that black Goodwrench thing that's got some mojo working there too. In any case, they are circulating the track, the front five, with a bit of a gap back to Todd Forbes in the 07, and Johnny Benson Jr. in the 21, running 6th and 7th. But here's a look at the first, second, and third place cars. And with that caution flag, Mike Miller and Glenn Allen Jr. have, of course, closed the gap on the leader, J.D. Summers, in his number 22 Ford Quaker State Thunderbird.
I did want to say just a quick hello to Linda McCurdy, who's the wife of the crew chief, Kevin McCurdy, for Tony Roper. Tony looks like is out of the race today, but they're celebrating a 10th anniversary. Linda's at home watching. Linda, I know this isn't the way you wanted it to go, but happy anniversary from us.
Let's go once again down to Ricochet Ralph Shaheen down inside the racetrack for an update. Ralph?
Eddie Sharp in the 21st Century Super Fitness entry, who is fourth in the rookie points, is down one cylinder. The plug came off. They put it back on. It didn't stay, so he's running on 5. We had Bobby Archer, Bobby Daughter, and Ken Stopper all make pit stops during that last yellow to readjust their suspensions, tires, and fuels. They're back out.
And we've got a spin up in turn number 3. It was the number 54 rookie driver Steve Shive who looped it. Steve had started in 18th position in his Rick Cole Budweiser Chevrolet. Everybody was able to either move to the high side or the low side. It looked precarious because there was a whole host of cars coming on the scene. Shive is okay. He had 7 starts last year. That's the maximum number you can have without violating your rookie eligibility for the following year.
So there is the Budweiser Chevrolet, and hats off to Steve Shive for a great job of driving after a little miscue there. We'll come back to the Glass City 300 where you can enjoy lots more racing along with these folks right after this. The AC-Delco Challenge Series, the premier short track racing series, has joined forces with Short Track Racing Magazine, the premier publication geared to short track racing fans. For subscription information, call 1-800-468-7876. Now, real quick, let's go to the premier pit reporter in auto racing, Ralph Shaheen. Ralph?
Well, we got a lot of activity going on in the pits down here. We had a bunch of cars coming in and out. Here comes the 54 machine of Shivey. Everything seems to be okay with that car. He said he just had to get out of the throttle due to a slower car, and him and Jay Sauter got together, and he said just one of those racing things. Tony Roper lost the motor. That's what happened to the 10 car, by the way. Brad Loney came in. He took tires and fuel, readjusted his suspension, as did Harold Fair and Dave Sensiba. Now we're waiting for the Miller machine, Rick Miller, to come back through. He's got a leaky valve cover on his entry.
Well, I have to ask, Rob Albright, Brad Loney, among the leaders, the only one that came in that time, and what's that going to do to his situation?
Well, it's still early, and we do anticipate a lot of cautions. Brad has now already passed 4 or 5 cars as he marches toward the front. You never know. Sometimes that strategy of getting out of sync with the rest of the leaders works, and sometimes it doesn't. Here at Toledo, it's always a dangerous decision to do that because you can get caught up in something that happens on the racetrack that you're likely to avoid if you're running in the top 4 or 5. So I guess the jury is still out as to whether or not that was a good choice or a poor one.
Well, there is something to that kind of stop when everybody else you're racing with stops. And then on the other hand, we've seen races won and lost, I might add, by guys who decide to do a little bit of a renegade pit stop program, do a little something their own way. We've seen it work out for the good. We've also seen it work out for the poor. So we'll file that away for future reference, the fact that Brad Loney stopped during the second caution here in the Glass City 300.
And we said don't worry about Mike Miller. He'd be back, and he is. After this caution period, now he's really beginning to challenge J.D. Summers. And as I told you, he sets a car up to go the long runs.
Here's a battle for 8th spot on the outside as Gary St. Amand, the number 7 machine. On the inside, it is, of course, the Bluebird, Bob Seneker in the 84. And then fighting his way around the outside, there's Scott Hansen. So this is a great battle going on for 8th spot after we look at the leaders a moment ago.
And here's a pass for the lead. J.D. Summers slides up out of the groove. Mike Miller takes over the top spot. Glenn Allen Jr. comes along with him. Mike Eddy not able to get by, at least not yet.
Well, as wide as this racetrack is, Rob Albright, it seems as though the groove is actually fairly narrow. We've heard drivers talking about getting just a little bit too high, and up there in the marbles, there's a lot of loose stuff high on the racetrack.
What happens, though, I think, Brian, normally here, when it's warm, as the race progresses, the cars do tend to move a little bit higher on the racetrack. That does run into a second groove. So you'll see guys choosing different lines. Expect side-by-side racing maybe after the first 150 laps of this race.
So now the race is between Mike Miller, the number 18. The pole sitter is back out in front. Glenn Allen Jr. in the number 15 machine and qualified third, sat right behind Mike on the starting grid. So those two are the ones going at it for the lead right now. J.D. Summers has drifted back significantly, 4 or 5 car lengths, and Mike Eddy's challenging him for third spot.
Glenn Allen Jr. pressuring Mike Miller for the lead. And what a story on this Glenn Allen car. That sponsor, you can see it on the tail panel, Eaglewood Construction. It's a husband and wife team. It's a development company. Randy and Mary Ellen from Rockford, Michigan. They happened to meet Glenn Allen Jr. at a restaurant. Heard him talking about racing, and they say, what would it cost us to paint our name on your team? He told them, they said, we'll be out to your shop. They ended up writing a big check as his primary sponsor. They have nothing to sell in California. They just love Glenn Allen Jr., and they love ASA. This is truly the great American dream in stock car racing.
Well, you know, we were both hanging around when some of the story was being related. You know how the gossip in the pit goes, and the guys at Glenn Allen's crew were asked, well, what do you guys need anything when you're on your way to Toledo? And they were joking with Randy, and then said, yeah, a couple of grand. It showed up on their desk the next day. They said, no, take it back. We were just kidding. Let's go again down to Ralph Shaheen.
There seems to be more to the story of Brad Loney. Apparently, he's got a problem with his header now, and cracking the header, and that'll cost him a few percents in this horsepower, Rob. So now Brad Loney has to do it all on the setup of the race car, not relying on the horsepower of the motor.
And you know, Brian, that might not be a significant problem at a slow racetrack, but this is a track where they're hitting maybe 125 at the midpoint of the straightaway, average lap speeds over 109 miles an hour, and that will cost him significantly. 10 or 15 horsepower, maybe all he'll give up if the problem doesn't worsen. And we saw Ted Musgrave win an ASA race a couple of years ago with a cracked header, but you know, it will create a different kind of an approach to this event for that entire team.
Now Mike Miller finding a way around Rick Miller in the number 31 car. Rick Miller out of Dunbar, Pennsylvania, in the Extreme Home Powerflow Chevrolet. Both of them there looked like Mike wanted to go high, and Glenn thought about ducking down low, thinking maybe Rick Miller would move up a little bit, and he'd use it to his advantage. Didn't work. Mike's around the outside. Glenn went with him.
Mike Eddy now begins to close in on fellow Pontiac driver. And look at this now. We've got Pontiacs running 1, 2, 3. And into the 4th position, I believe, is, if I'm not mistaken, Johnny Benson Jr. No, it's still J.D. Summers. Benson is right there, and right behind Benson is Tony Raines in car number 87. Ralph, a pretty good battle back there, but J.D. Summers is sliding back in the field.
It's only a matter of time before, we got big problems down in turn 1, Rob.
I'll say we got big problems down. It almost took out the leader, and it did take out the number 2 car in the racetrack, the 15 of Glenn Allen Jr., not able to avoid a spinning Bill Baird in the Saturn Machine Allen's Body Shop Chevrolet. Mike Miller escapes unscathed. That puts Mike Eddy in the 2nd spot, and there you can see a little bit of aerodynamically challenged bodywork there for the 15 car.
Well, the question, and I'm sure one that Ralph will be heading pit side to get answered, did it do any suspension damage, any chassis damage to the right front corner of car number 15? He didn't hit really hard, and maybe something that they can push and prod and bend and re-tape back into position. Well, we'll take another peek at it. I didn't actually see it develop on the racetrack. We'll get a chance here in just a second.
I just heard the massive intake of breath here at the track, and there it is.
Well, there's J.D. Summers. It's already happened. You can see Bill Baird sliding down. Now, where's Glenn Allen Jr.? He's already up at the high side, and he's already made contact with somebody.
Yep.
I'm going to look at the tail end of Rick Miller's car number 31 because I think that Allen might have hit him in the back. We'll see. Look at the left side of your screen. That's where it's happening. Here comes. You're looking at J.D. Summers in the black car putting a lap on Steve Shive, and right at the top of the screen, the damage has already been done. No, it is not Rick Miller that he hit, and I'm not really sure who it was.
In any case, we have a change among the leaders. We will delete Glenn Allen Jr. in the 15 from 2nd spot, put Mike Eddy in his place, and we will resume in just a few moments. America's premier short track series returns to Toledo, Ohio in the Glass City 300. Brian Drever and Rob Albright up here in the booth, and the hardworking Ralph Shaheen down inside. And a hardworking crew. We knew they had a shot of what went on out there. They just had to find it. Here it is.
Well, you can see Mike Miller goes to the low side of Bill Baird. I don't think Bill saw him coming. He was going to the bottom to try to take that line. And it looks like Glenn Allen's contact was with the leader, Mike Miller. Very little damage to the rear, and Glenn is back with the racetrack, and I think he's okay. Ralph, I know, is down there, and has just updated us that, yeah, it's just some cosmetic damage.
We're back to racing, and if Mike Miller was having a problem with Glenn Allen Jr. on his tail, he's going to have a big problem now. As the number 88, Mike Eddy's in 2nd spot right now. Mike Eddy, who started this race in 8th position, the outside of row 4, has now worked his way up through and staying out of trouble in contention for the lead. So you've got 2 great veteran race car drivers, one a 7-time champion, one who sat on the pole here in Mike Miller for the very first time in his long career. Let's go once again down to Ralph Shaheen with an update on the pit stops.
Well, you guys were correct about the cosmetic damage to both Mike Eddy and, of course, to to the car of Glenn Allen Jr., but the story is the 22 of J.D. Summers. He currently runs in third, but he's down a cylinder. Lost it early on, and now he is still able to hold off the hard-charging Johnny Benson.
That's pretty amazing. Of course, Canadian legend Junior Hanley builds, owns, and prepares this race car for J.D. Summers, so that's why he's still able to hang on in spite of being down a cylinder. As Tony Raines is now challenging, it looks like there he is, Glenn Allen for 4th position. Tony Raines started 12th, has come to 4th. He told us at Columbus it might take a while for his team to gel with him as the new driver and Howie Leddow, crew chief. They're both really quiet, but it's coming together here at Toledo. And Tony has always run very well on the high bank racetracks.
Here are the two leaders, the red 18, the tomato red 18 of Mike Miller out of Marietta, Georgia. Mike driving the Atlantic Communications Pontiac and the familiar GM Goodwrench Pontiac of Mike Eddy. A little bit of damage to the right front end there on the black car. We don't see any damage to the left rear, which is where the contact was made to Mike Miller's car. These two guys really outdistancing the rest of the field. J.D. Summers staying close. Number 87 car of Tony Raines making a run at him now, as you said. And Johnny Benson Jr. very patiently running along at the 5th spot.
Eddie Sharp's car sits motionless in the pits. Bobby Archer's been in and out under green. And we've got a major crash again, this time in the same location, in between turns 1 and 2, involving Bobby Dotter almost collecting Brett Bell. And there is the machine, the 08 of Dotter, the Luke Tech Chevrolet.
What a difference a year makes. We've said that on several occasions. Now, last year, it seemed as though all the incidents were going on down here in turns 3 and 4. This time out, everything that's happened thus far has happened up in turns 1 and 2.
I believe Tom Jones may have been involved in that incident as we watched the leader, Mike Miller, who was under heavy pressure from fellow Pontiac driver Mike Eddy. It did look like Tom Jones in the Felpro Pacejacks Pontiac may have been involved in that as well. There, you can see the right rear bodywork has been ripped away on that automobile.
That probably didn't happen all by itself, so it's safe, a very safe thing to assume, Rob, that something, some altercation has taken place there for
That's
Tom
it, wreck
Jones.
my credibility. I'm supposed to be the color guy. I'm supposed to be the guy that knows all about this stuff, you know?
Well, you know, I've always admired your remarkable grasp of the obvious as well as my own.
Yes.
And right now, because we have a lull in the action, it's obvious that this would be a good time to take a little bit of a pause, at least from what's going on here at the racetrack. Give you a chance to look at some important messages. We'll be right back. Motorhome facilities for Group 5 sports and the AC-Delco Challenge Series are provided by Winnebago Industries. For more information about Winnebago, call them at 1-800-643-4892.
30 cars, Brian, still being shown on the lead lap. Watching Glenn Allen Jr. and Brad Loney, as well as Todd Forbes, moving back up through the field after early pit stops. Tom Jones, there he is, the 0 machine. He's been in and back out, as has Bobby Dotter. There he is on the high side. So just cosmetic damage now as we go back to green.
We do have an in-car camera courtesy of Tony's Pizza, and that comes out of Randy Larson's car, the 02. Randy had some trouble here. He broke a cylinder head, a valve cover gasket. I knew I was in the right direction. Valve cover gasket leaked, and it caused him not to be able to qualify for the race, but he was generous and kind enough to loan his in-car camera and put it in Tony Raines' car, courtesy of his sponsor, Tony's Pizza. We'll have a look from inside the number 87 of Tony Raines.
And I think it made Raines faster because he's come from 12th. He's now riding 4th and challenging for that 3rd spot right behind J.D. Summers. Tony, of course, new to this team, the Baker Enterprises Cleanburn Pontiac operation. He brought Cleanburn with him to this new team.
Studio Gear, they're the folks that make that rig that Randy Larson has taken it upon himself to buy his own in-car camera, puts it in his car, and allows the signal to be used on our broadcast. And we're really grateful to the folks from Tony's Pizza and to Randy Larson for his use of that in-car camera. It'll give us a look out the front of the number 87 car of Tony Raines, running in 4th spot right now, and pushing J.D. Summer with that limp engine. He's got down a cylinder, according to Ralph Shaheen, so he's down on power, even though his car is handling extremely well.
Raines was a non-factor in the opening run of the season in Columbus. Started 27, improved somewhat, but finished 15th a lap down. And a lot of people said, well, maybe he's not as good as we've always said he was. They were very premature in that decision. It does take time for any driver to acclimate himself to a new operation, and Tony, it's only taken him a single event.
There's another look out the front of the 87 there. You can see the 2 leaders up in front, 3rd place right in front of him, and there is a look up from the outside of the number 87 car of Tony Raines. The Baker Enterprises Cleanburn Pontiac running 4th right now. And back up front here is Mike Miller and Mike Eddy. Mike and Mike. Last year it was Miller and Miller battling for points. Butch Miller and Mike Miller battling for points all season long early. And towards the end of the season, of course, Mike Miller faded. Mike Eddy made a charge at Butch Miller towards the end, but Butch ended up winning the championship. Now we got Mike and Mike going at it up front here. And, well, no change in the leaders right now. They have settled in and paced themselves toward the finish of this Glass City 300.
2 weeks ago at Columbus, it took Mike only Eddy, that is, 15 laps to get to the head of the class, and he was never passed after that. He's having a much more difficult time getting around cagey veteran Mike Miller in the, as you call it, tomato red number 18. You ought to see, you know, the tomatoes we get in Florida. If it was tomato red, that thing would be somewhere between peach and pink.
Well, Mike says you can call him a veteran, you can call him a cagey veteran, just don't call him a grizzled veteran, so we won't.
Even if he is.
I've made no secret about Mike Miller from Marietta, Georgia. I live in Atlanta. Mike's my neighbor. I visited him early in the 1994 season before the AC-Delco Challenge Series began. And, you know, I got a personal favorite in Mike, and it's really satisfying to see him run this far up front. But I'll tell you, another guy that's making a great run through the field right now, he started 20th, is Jay Sauter in the #1 automobile. Of course, he was the victim of last year's finish by Butch Miller. Ended up second after he was leading the race coming into the final couple of corners. Butch got inside, nudged him up a little bit, and made a run at the finish line, beating him by a fender. Jay Sauter has run from 20th to 10th on the racetrack, so we'll be keeping an eye on the #1 car. There he is, in the first chiropractic metalcraft Pontiac.
And what a great story it is. This machine competed 2 or 3 times last year with another driver behind the wheel. Jay began with KC Motorsports in 1994. It was a team that was self-financed through much of the last couple of years. Its car owner, Chris Weiss, we were sorry to see him go, but he simply could not continue to pump the dollars into the organization that he had. So Jay spent a few races with Gunderman as we've got a spin coming out of turn number 4, just past the start-finish line. It's racing surgeon Dr. Yale Conley, who barely avoids what would have been very painful contact with a large tire entering turn number 1. Didn't see what happened. We simply heard the squeal of tires right by our booth, and he's going to get that machine righted and continue around.
Well, fortunately, it was without further incident to any of the other cars on the racetrack. Dr. Yale Conley doing a little surgical agricultural alteration down there, and he managed to avoid hitting anything solid. Back out onto the racetrack he goes. And naturally, as you would expect, the caution flag and the pace car are now out on the racetrack as we slow things down here. 85 laps into the Glass City 300 is where we are right now. There's another look at the 3-car of Yale Conley from Vienna, West Virginia. The racing surgeon, we have called him many times. And here's another look at just what happened. This is our finish line camera.
Speed shot off turn number 4, and it looks like he simply lost it. You can see, I'm not sure who it was right behind him, but I don't think anybody made contact. And, you know, I expect to see that several times today. The track really flattens off coming off turn number 4, and it's real easy to get away from you.
There's a look at Yale Conley circulating the track without any damage to his race car. We're going to take a cut away from the action. 86 laps are gone, a lot of them yet to come. Timing is everything, and you're just in time for the green flag to come out here on lap 89 of 300 at the Toledo Speedway. Here in the Glass City 300, Mike Miller, the number 18, the Tomato 18 out front with the black 88 in second spot. J.D. Summers still doing a great job hanging on, 1 cylinder fewer than everyone else, to 3rd place, although he is getting a heck of a challenge from Tony Raines in the 87 car. And what about Johnny Benson Jr. just patiently rolling along, just riding back there in 5th place with Gary St. Amant 6th.
Well, I think anybody inside the top 15 or 20 at this juncture is just riding. You can see once again the field in single file order. They did say they weren't going to race for the first 50 laps or so, but again, when 28, 30 cars remain on the lead lap, it's going to become a race of strategy. Glenn Allen Jr. was back in the pits while we were under caution, now runs next to last of the 28 cars that still remain on the lead lap.
What do you mean 28 or 30? Now, Torch has told us 28.
I know.
And the know-it-all brothers say 28. There's 28 cars on the lead lap.
That's right.
Our statisticians working hard up here for us, as always, keeping track of things. And as difficult as it is, we're happy to have those guys working for us. As we can keep track of the 1st and 2nd place cars, that's about all I can handle. And I count on Rob for maybe 3rd and 10th. And then we got to go to the real experts.
Now you're looking again at the heated battle, 3rd and 4th positions. J.D. Summers, who we continue to be told is down a cylinder, and if so, it's a pretty amazing run for the young man from Michigan.
Well, maybe they don't need any more than 5 then. If that's the case, he's doing pretty good on 5 out there. The V6 engines, if he's down 1, he's still doing a fine job. Of course, The race car setup and handling is so important on the track here. Apparently he has enough horsepower to keep the car pedaling around the track there, and it's the handling setup that he used, obviously, to his advantage, getting on the outside of. He was 1,000th of a second slower than Mike Miller in qualifying, so even though he sat on the outside of the first row, it wasn't a whole lot of difference in qualifying between the pole sitter and J.D. Summers, who now runs third.
In fact, Brian, of the 47 cars, I think, that made qualifying runs, 35 of them qualified within 0.4 of a second of one another.
We've come to expect that in the AC-Delco Challenge Series, America's premier short track series. And we're going to go once again down to Ralph with Mike Chappie. Tire story is the issue of the day.
Well, actually, Brian, we want to talk to Mike Chappie about why Jay Sauter's running so well. He's really running great, Mike. Can he keep this pace up?
I think he can. There's nobody in the business that's smoother, and he's just trying to save the right rear tire right now. And he said all the other guys in front of him are just trying to burn him off the corner, and I think he's going to do a real good job for us.
You know, Jay had a bit of controversy here last year at this race. Is he destined to try and upset that bad mark?
We don't really go into it aiming to do anything like that. We're just trying to win every race, and I think we got a real good shot at it today.
Well, he's definitely charging to the front, gentlemen. One other note about Yale Conley. One reason why he might have lost it on the front straightaway is he had lost his power steering early on, so he might have been fighting that wheel.
I find it interesting, Rob, that they mentioned that he was trying to save the right rear tire. Now, is that one, he's just more fond of that one than the others?
Well, of course, on a banked racetrack, you're always going to get more wear on the right side tires than the left side tires. And the right rear, depending on how you set the car up. If you like a car that is neutral or tends to push a little bit going into the corners, that throws more weight bias to the right front corner. Therefore, that's the one you have to be concerned about. If you like your race car a little bit loose, a little bit tail happy, then it's the right rear that tends to get the most of you. So it just depends on what you as a driver prefer in terms of chassis setup. We've got 28 cars showing on the lead lap. Let's see if we can get through some of them as we watch this battle for the lead. Back in the pack, and I think that's about 9th, 10th, and 11th positions. And let's tell you, as Brian Reffner now goes by, or tries to go by, Tom Jones. Right behind him is Steve Holtzhausen in car number 78. Then it's Jay Sauter and Jeff Neal, who started way deep in 34th position. The Lakeville, Illinois driver of the Pyro Split Fire All City Chevrolet has moved up now, Brian, to 11th spot, and he's done it very quietly.
Well, I got a couple of pieces of information about Jeff Neal. They came to the racetrack. Of course, Jeff qualified so well in Columbus. They came to the racetrack. They had some, as Jeff put it, experimental stuff that they tried out on the car, suspension parts, shocks, and things like that. On the drawing board, it looked good. On the racetrack, it was horrible. And he just said, we got out there in qualifying and just had no clue what we were trying to do. We kept trying to adjust things, didn't work. Finally, we just ended up putting the old stuff back on the race car, the tried and true suspension components that worked so well for us in Columbus, and we expect to make a run towards the front. Well, he's doing that from 34th up to, well, wherever he is right now. He's in 11th place. That's a pretty darn good run.
This is that continuing battle from 8th spot on back through about 14th. You can see Bob Seneker in the tail end of that frame in car number 84. He dropped back early, and now he's beginning to pick his way a little slowly through the field and make his way back toward the front. Mike Miller, Mike Eddy, J.D. Summers, Tony Raines, and Johnny Benson are 1 through 5, 6 through 10. Gary St. Amant, Scott Hansen in car number 53. Then it's Brian Reffner, Steve Holtzhausen, and Jay Sauter. 11th through 15th is that Jeff Neal machine, 11th. Matt Kenseth is 12th. Pat Bordeaux 13th. Dennis Lampman 14th. And Bob Seneker shown in 15th position. 16th through 20th. Dave Sensiva, Harold Fair, Brad Loney, the 07 of Todd Forbes, and then Bill Baird, who was involved in an incident in car number 26. 21st through 25th, the 05 machine of Matt Hutter, 56 Brett Bell, then Ted Smokestad, Rick Beebe, and Bobby Dotter in car number 08. Rounding out the cars on the lead lap are Todd Oliver, the 51 of Brandon Sperling, Joe Knott, and the last lead lap automobile at last count was Glenn Allen Jr. in car number 15. And we're kind of looking back in the pack. Since then, he's moved up a few spots, but is not that far in front of the leader. So that car is not running the way it was before that on-track incident he was involved in.
Of course, since you got that list, the Bob Seneker has moved his car from 15th to 12th spot. He now sits right behind and just slightly outside of Jeff Neal in the 75. Let's go again to Ralph. This time he's got the tire story.
Brian, as you know, Goodyear provides all the tires for the ASA competitors, and they do a tremendous job of tailoring the tires to the Civic racetrack. This weekend at Toledo, we got a bit of a different tire on the right side of the car. It's a softer compound tire, and it's about a ½ inch bigger than what we're running on the left side, which is also a little bit harder. That offsets that stagger a little bit, so there's stagger built into the tire automatically. They will also run this tire with about 10 pounds more air pressure than on the left. That increases that stagger even more. So there's about 2.5 inches difference in stagger between the right side and the left side of the ASA car here today.
Brian, we talked about that second groove. There are at least a couple of guys who've begun to make that work. As the yellow is displayed, we've got an incident on the backstretch involving the third-place car of J.D. Summers.
The 22 car facing the wrong way in the middle of the backstretch there, and something went definitely amiss for J.D. Summer. We'll hope to get a look at it, and we will queue up the replays. We will try to find what happened for you for the car of J.D. Summer. We also know that Tony Raines was involved, and we'll be back to show it to you right after this. We're back to the Glass City 300 here in Toledo, Ohio, as the premier short track series in America resumes with an on-track incident that occurred just before the commercial break. They're cleaning up the last little bit of it. Here is a look from the backstretch.
And it looks like J.D. Summers is already sideways. It involved the third and fourth place cars. You can see Tony Raines has also sustained damage. He's been in the pits, lost a lap in the process of changing the right front corner. And you can see Johnny Benson and Gary St. Amant moving quickly to the outside of the racetrack.
There's Summer sliding towards the inside. It looked as though there was some damage to Raines' car as he was going by, so perhaps those two did get together. Here's a look from inside Tony Raines' car, and well, there's J.D. Summers spinning out, and there's the hood. Okay, we just saw the hood buckle up a little bit there, so it looked like Tony tagged him on the way by as he was already sideways. Let's go down to Ralph.
Well, you're right about Tony Raines and J.D. getting together. Now, J.D. is in the pits. They got a lot of damage in this front nose. They're going to try, I guess, to belt it on. It looks like they should just rip it off, though. They are changing right side tires. They'll get around here and get him back out, and they really did not get the hood down at all, gentlemen. They're going to have to get him back in here probably and get that fixed. Tony Raines had problems to the right side of his car. He had suspension damage to the car. They've knocked the toe out on that machine. He's going to probably have to come back in there and square that back up.
The racetrack being cleaned up, the cars being repaired, and the racing itself will resume here shortly. While we've got a pause in the action here, it's a good time to show you our Young Racers feature for this week. Here's Josh Duvall.
Hi, I'm Josh Duvall. Welcome to the Young Racers. This week's question comes from Trey Ingram of Raleigh, North Carolina, and he wants to know how the ASA got started. So we went to its founder, Rex Robbins.
Josh, that's a good question. 28 years ago this month, May the 2nd, 1968, we ran our first sanctioned race. The sanctioning body was merely put together as a vehicle to promote and sanction races at one speedway, Sun Valley Speedway in Anderson. We had hoped to one day purchase that track. The first year, the owner decided not to sell the track, and we were stuck with a sanctioning body. We'd lost a lot of money in 1968, but near the end of the season, we did do 2 100-lap stock car races, and they turned out to be fairly successful. And I think we made maybe $300 or $400 on both of those races. So we talked ourselves into going one more year. And in '69, it turned around, and now 28 years later, we're here at Toledo Speedway with a $3 million series and a $500,000 point fund. So I guess we made the right decision.
Thank you, Mr. Robbins. If you have a question, write it down and send it to me at The Young Racers, P.O. Box 26792, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28221.
And after the incident on the racetrack involving the 22 car of J.D. Summers and the 87 of Tony Raines, some drivers opting to go into the pits, some not. And coming out really smelling like a rose on this deal is Jeff Neal, who started 34th, and now he's run himself up into second by a series of circumstances. The leader, Mike Miller, also did not pit. So they now run 1 and 2. Got a quick word about Jeff Neal. We were joking with because he just had a horrible qualifying day. Didn't even think he was going to make the field. So I went down in an effort to lend a little levity to their very serious situation. I said, well, you know, the ASA has got that best looking car rule that they can they can just put in the best looking car that they like that didn't qualify. So you don't have any problem. You got a great looking race car. You're in, Jeff.
Whoa, that was pretty low. In fact, it was Todd Forbes in the Yoder Maisto Thunderbird that won the best appearing car. And gorgeous paint job. Maybe we'll get to, almost getting out of shape was Jeff Neal. We'd like to thank the folks from Maisto. We showed up here this weekend and mentioned them on the air last weekend, and I had a beautiful new die-cast Ferrari that I'm going to race against the one they gave you, and I'm going to blow your doors off.
Well, they gave you one of the model ones? They gave me a real one, man. I got an XJ220 Jag.
No way. I want to see it. I want to
They're
go for a ride.
great-looking car. You'll see more of those little Maisto cars. Rob and I are going racing here later on this season with our Maisto 1/18 scale cars. Beautiful.
And Brian, suddenly Jeff Neal is going backwards in his race car number 75 inexplicably as Brad Loney comes off the track and right in front of us in car number 33. So that cracked header, apparently the problem is worsening for him as there he is in that Winnebago H&W Flex Steel Chevrolet. Had such a great run a couple of weeks ago at Columbus and a great qualifying run yesterday.
Mike Miller to the left of the screen there still runs out in front. Second on the racetrack, Matt Kenseth, the number 68 machine. The Nielsen Racing Chevrolet, there he just comes into view.
And his car owner, Fred Nielsen, who used to field cars for Joe Shear, racing veteran, is working hard at trying to put a sponsorship deal together that would bring Matt to this series as a Rookie of the Year contender. He's not officially signed for that, but boy, I'll tell you, if they're working with anybody specifically, this has got to be an encouragement to this prospective sponsor. Kenseth, as a rookie or prospective rookie, is giving it quite a ride in second place.
Looking a little deeper in the field, there's Johnny Benson Jr. There's also the number 32 car of Ted Smokestad running just behind him. And this is in the middle of the bunch. The 6 car is there as well. Rick Beebe. Rick Beebe running one of 2 Chevrolet Monte Carlo bodies in the race. And on the outside, Tom Jones in the 0. Of course, he involved a little while ago. Has some damage to his race car, and he's slipping around to the outside. But Johnny Benson Jr. charging up in the middle of the bunch right now as Mike Miller continues to lead way out front. This is a race a little bit further back in the pack, specifically in something along the order of 7th and 8th spots.
I kind of predicted that Rick Beebe might be the favorite for Rookie of the Year. He's now sliding backward a little bit in the engine armor of Monte Carlo, but he's battling back now, failing to make the show after a flat tire in qualifying at Columbus a couple of weeks ago.
Let's go once again down inside the racetrack to Ralph Shaheen.
That is why Jeff Neal got loose out of the racetrack. Rear end grease coming out of the bottom side of Brad Loney's machine. Got the car loose on the racetrack. He gathered back up. Bad news for Brad Loney. His day is done.
Well, that's going to shake the point standings up quite a bit. Loney came in after a strong second place run to Mike Eddy 2 weeks ago. A career best finish. He'll drop well back now with an early exit from this race at lap 129.
There's Mike Miller out front still in the Atlanta Communications Pontiac. The pole sitter relinquished the lead early for just a few laps to J.D. Summer, but he has retaken the lead and is in command of this one. We are approaching the halfway mark of the Glass City 300, and we'll continue when you come back. America's premier short track series continues with the Glass City 300. We're 139 laps out of 300 down right now, and Mike Miller in the number 18 car out of Marietta, Georgia, continues to lead. There's a good look at the Tomato Red 18. A former Minnesota driver, a veteran of the American Speed Association, took about 10 years off until 3 years ago, came back racing like a youngster, he said. He's got a whole new lease on life, and after sitting on the pole here, I got to tell you, though, down in North Georgia, they don't say on the pole. He said they may set up poles up here, but down in North Georgia, we're on the staub, he said. They drive staubs at the ground, sledgehammers down there. We're on the staub, they say.
Let's leave it to those that are driving poles in the ground and call them poles on the racetrack. Johnny Benson has just taken 4th position away from Jeff Neal in car number 75. Now, I believe Benson has made a pit stop as Todd Forbes, who was running in 4th position, is off the pace, now comes on pit road. Mike Miller has not yet made a pit stop, Brian, and you got to be considering the fact he's now gone over 70 miles, and they normally think about 90, 100 miles is all you can go on fuel. He's going to need a caution pretty soon and some gasoline.
Well, I can also tell you that the crew, the Mike Miller crew, has been working very hard on their pit stops. And when they come in, they should be, if we can believe what they've been saying, they should be very fast in the pits, getting a couple of tires off and getting gas in the car. They've been running, as they put it, around 9-second pit stops, and that, as you know, is very fast.
Well, he continues to move away. We talked about those soft tires, but he must be really tiptoeing on the tires. There's Johnny Benson now, is closed up on the 3rd place car, number 81 of Harold Fair, who's having a great run. Harold in that Alec Pinsino-owned car, but Harold, of course, now is full-time racer. Started back at 25th in that Build-A-Mold Dana Racing Pontiac.
Dana Corporation, of course, one of their new sponsors this year, is a company that owns a lot of brands that we see on the race car. The Dana Corporation folks have come on board with Harold Fair and his operation and have really helped them step their program up a notch. Harold Fair, of course, one of the great veterans of racing, is, instead of being sort of a part-time racer, has now kind of gone to being a full-time guy, and that is, of course, what it takes to compete on this circuit. We talked to Harold about how it feels different to be a, quote, full-time racer.
My son and I are working at the shop. With Bobby coming on board, we may have more people coming in the shop, and we're going to run it as a business, and, you know, we're going to be serious about it. We're going to have fun at it, but we're going to work at it, and we're going to try to get things right. We were down here testing about a month ago, and we have both cars working pretty good, and I think over the course of the whole year, I think you're going to find our cars in the victory circle.
Up on the outside of turn number 2, the 51 car of Brandon Sperling. I know it's tough finding a parking spot around the Toledo Speedway. That's not where you want to take it. We'll take a break and come right back. Welcome back, everybody, to the premier short track series in the country, the American Speed Association's AC-Delco Challenge Series. And we are right dead center in the middle of 300 laps of racing here in the Glass City 300. And after the pit stops, we have a new leader, and the leader is number 84, and that is Bob Seneker. Goes back out on the racetrack as the number 1 car at the top of the list. We also have joining us here in the booth Brent Snelson, Director of Sales for AC-Delco, their Consumer Relations Aftermarket Department. And welcome to the Bird's Nest here, Brent.
Thank you, Brian. Great to be here.
What do you think so far of what's going on out there? Another Toledo day, it looks like.
Well, yes. Let me first state it's a real pleasure for us to once again sponsor the ASA AC-Delco Challenge Series. And this is why we're here. It is so exciting. And once again, beautiful day. And it looks like Bob's in the lead now.
Well, we've come to expect great racing here at Toledo. Certainly after last spring, things were very exciting indeed. And we were looking forward to coming back. And it's picked up right where it left off, I'd have to say, Rob.
Yeah, Brent, I did notice you didn't have much enthusiasm in your voice when you said Bob's in the lead now, since he's driving the car that has the blue oval on the front.
That's right. Mike was doing real well there in the number 88 car, and I don't know where he is now, but he's not number 2 like he was earlier.
And obviously you've got some brand loyalty, but by the same token, Brent, I think this series has really epitomized brand equity, because you've got the Ford of Bob Seneker leading, Mike Eddy perennially strong. You've got the Chevrolets of Brad Loney and Dave Sensiba, who earned Rookie of the Year last year. So parity is what it's all about. Competition is what it's all about, and that's what I've seen from you folks and your involvement with this series from the outset. Is, you know, your goal is to see as competitive racing as possible for the fans.
Yeah, that's exactly right. You know, the greater the awareness of our products and our services, the greater the equity, the brand equity, and hopefully that's a positive brand equity, and then of course that impacts preference and then purchase. In fact, we have just recently introduced the AC Rapid Fire Spark Plug. It's a performance spark plug, and we're in the process of selling that to many of our automotive retailers. One here locally, Murray's, I believe, will be advertising it next week. And then there's a number of our accounts, the Track Autos and AutoZone, and also Nationwide is going to be selling it shortly. So it's a real new product for us, and we feel that it's going to generate a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of sales.
Well, I'm sure that a lot of fans out there, looking just for that little bit of extra performance, they'll certainly be looking for those on the shelves of their favorite auto parts stores.
We're still under caution here on the racetrack, and just so you know, Brent, Mike Eddy came back. He's in 8th spot right now. Mike Miller also in a Pontiac, who was the leader, has come back out onto the racetrack in 5th position. We're going to go real quick as we just went to green down to Ralph Shaheen in the infield. Now, some of the pit stops went relatively well, some not so well, Ralph.
Brian, watch this replay here for a second of what took place with J.D. Summers' car. You'll see this air gun come flying around from the backside and hit Zach Abraham right in the back. He's a little beat up right now, and he's going to go talk to the medical staff to see if he's okay. He said said, he really took a shot to the ribs. The gun came from Glenn Allen Jr.'s car, so Zach Abraham a little beat up on a pit stop.
Wow, I have never seen that, and I think one of those air guns weighs about 15 or 20 pounds, and that thing looked like it had been shot out of a cannon. He took a real shot. He'll be a sore pup tomorrow.
A lot of air pressure behind those things, and of course, well, they get away from you. As we look back out onto the racetrack, Bob Seneker in the number 84 is the leader, although he is physically behind Bobby Archer in the 93 car, the Build-A-Mold Trim Blast 2000 Pontiac teammate car of Harold Fair. And running down the list, in the second spot is the number 5 car of Brian Reffner. In third spot is the 4 car of Dave Sensiva. How many times have we seen those two guys last year at least running one right with the other?
Many.
Then it's the 78 car sitting in fourth spot, Steve Holtzhausen doing a very consistent job. Mike Miller's 11-second pit stop got him back out in 5th place. And then it's the 21 of Johnny Benson, the 53 of Scott Hansen, the 88 of Mike Eddy, and the 68 car out there in 9th spot is Matt Kenson, and Jeff Neal appears to have gotten all the grease off his tires, and he's running 10th right now.
Brent, I know we need to let you go, but before you go, I'd just like to ask you, I mean, it's already been a wonderful relationship between the American Speed Association and the GMSPO and the AC-Delco folks. What do you envision for the future?
We're going to continue with our participation in motorsports and with the AC-Delco Challenge Series. By the way, gentlemen, you're doing a great job for us. We appreciate it. And this is what it's all about. It's grassroots, it's excitement, and the fans keep coming out and keep buying our products as a result. So thank you once again.
And thank you.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure indeed, Rob Albright, as we look out onto the racetrack again. Things have shuffled up a little bit. They're different than they were, of course, before the pit stops. That's the way racing works. Some guys went in early. Now, we had questioned, of course, very early in the race when Brad Loney went in, but he went in because he had to, and he's now out of the race. Some guys pitted a little earlier than others. They wait for those cautions. They play their cards the way they see them. Now, Mike Miller went a long way without going into the pits. When he finally did, he lost a few spots, of course, on the racetrack. And Bob Seneker, if you want to talk about another KG veteran, there's a guy out in front right now.
And he's easing away just a little bit from Brian Reffner. Here's the good battle. It's 3rd through 6th positions. Dave Sensiva followed by Steve Holtzhausen. And then it is the car number 18 of Mike Miller and Johnny Benson Jr. Now, just a couple of minutes ago, Sensiva was really knocking on the back door of Brian Reffner. He's now fallen into the clutches of this more experienced trio of drivers. Benson, who had the engine problem yesterday and really battled out of the, battled from behind all day long, now has his car running well. Look at Mike Miller racing toward the front. A lot of the drivers will now have made a second pit stop and may have fresh tires on both sides of the car. Miller just changed, I think, Brian, right side tires. You can only make 2 tire change stop under caution. And I think he probably now is prepared to go the distance if he needs to the checker.
Well, you did say that it's the right side tires that take a beating. Those are the ones they changed. He worked on Steve Holtzhausen for a while and got through. Johnny Benson went with him, by the way. Now both of them have moved around the 78 car, and they're tucked up behind the number 4. Whoa, Johnny Benson a little later on the brakes than Mike Miller moved up close to him there. And now they're working on the 4 car of David Sensiva and heading towards the front.
And just a couple hundred yards behind them are Mike Eddy and Scott Hansen, who also were on pit road, and they're beginning to close in as well. And look at Benson now, makes a bump on Mike Miller, and I think Miller knows that Benson really is not racing for points or a championship, but, he's got honor at stake here. He was the 1993 champ. He'd love to come back and win against his old mates, and I think he's kind of saying to Miller, hey, you need to make a move because Seneker and Reffner are getting away.
Brad Loney coming back out of the pit after an extended pit stop. We saw the oil dripping out of the rear end. Ralph, got some comment about that?
No, perhaps not. Maybe we'll have Ralph in just a minute, but they will do whatever they can. If it's something that can be repaired on pit road, they'll repair it because points are paramount. Ralph?
Well, they got Brad Loney's car fixed and back out. Brett Bell is sitting here in the Wonderbar Ford up on jacks. Brett, what's wrong with your car?
Ford was running well today, and we're just out there trying to ride, and it looks like we got tangled up in the zero car there. Just a racing incident. We ended up breaking a right front shock, and it looks like we got some sort of fuel delivery problem.
Tough day for the Wonderbar crew.
Back up front on the racetrack, it is the 84 of Bob Seneker running first spot with Brian Reffner in the black number 5 there, the structural transport Ford. So we've got a pair of T-Birds running up front right now. And then that great battle for 3rd, 4th, and 5th is Dave Sensiva providing the front And there it is Mike Miller trying to find a way around the 4 car. That's a Monte Carlo now. One of the 2 Monte Carlos on the racetrack. Dave Sensiba, the other being the 6 car of Rick Beebe. And they had said, both of them, both Rick Beebe and Dave Sensiba said that they experienced immediately much more downforce.
And Benson
on that
now,
car.
Brian, has moved to the low side of Mike Miller. He's forced the Pontiac up high. Benson is alongside, and he will take the 4th position away from Mike Miller.
Well, he was working pretty patiently on it. Let's see if he has any better luck with Dave Sensiba than Miller did. Sensiba now trying to get around the outside of the 9 car of Dennis Lampman. So let's see if the 1993 ASA champion has any better luck trying to get around Dave Sensiba and heading for the front.
It's an interesting pairing on the racetrack. Last year's Rookie of the Year battling against the 1990 Rookie of the Year, Johnny Benson Jr., who went on to win a championship in his 4th season. And Sensiba, coming from the same area, the Grand Rapids, Michigan area, would love nothing better to follow in Benson's footsteps in ASA.
Well, and add to the list the pole sitter for the Glass City 300, Mike Miller in the 18, and the 7-time ASA champion, Mike Eddy, who has now made another appearance just off the rear bumper of the 18 car. Let's go once again down to Ralph Shaheen in the infield with Todd Forbes, who's out.
Well, the Mesa Ford is on the blocks. What's wrong with it?
Well, something went in the motor. I don't really know exactly. I think initially something went wrong with the carburetor, but I think we might have burned the piston, cleaning it out.
Todd Forbes done here this afternoon at Toledo.
Well, now they got plenty of spare cars down there in the Forbes pit. They're not all ASA specifications, I don't think, and some of them might be a kind of a tight fit for Todd if he tried to climb inside those Maisto models.
I could loan him back my black Ferrari. That would definitely be a better choice than your Silver Jag.
Well, I don't know. The Silver Jag is at least the same color as the 07 car. Still looking at the 2 leaders, Bob Seneker, number 84, and Brian Reffner in the black number 5, and one of our cameramen, the crowd here in Toledo, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to Toledo and the Glass City 300. America's premier short track series continues with Bob Seneca running out in front along with Brian Reffner, and those 2 guys running scared. Because, man, I mean to tell you, there is a herd on their heels if they can just get untangled from each other. This race right here, Dave Sensiba, Johnny Benson Jr., Mike Miller and Mike Eddy all fighting over the honor of who's going to head towards the 2 leaders once they get themselves sorted out, Rob.
And stacked right behind them are the rest of the thundering herd of Scott Hansen in car number 53, then it's Steve Holtzhausen, Matt Kenseth, Gary St. Amant, and Jeff Neal who battle for position. There's the top 10. You can see Kenseth and Neal rounding out the top 10, going by the number 98 of Kent Stauffer. And as we watch this battle for 4th position, we've got to look at some incident that occurred a little bit ago between Dave Sensiba and Johnny Benson, as Sensiba trying to go to the low side of Tom Jones and Benson trying to go even lower. And if there's a guy that Benson doesn't want to be responsible for taking out of a race, it's his fellow Grand Rapids area driver, Dave Sensiba. And he did get out of the throttle and allow Dave to get squared away before again challenging him.
Sensiba probably pretty happy for that extra little bit of downforce on the tail end of that Monte Carlo body, too, keeping the rear end of that race car stuck on the track. Here's Benson on the low side. He makes it work this time, and now he finds in front of him the 26 car of Bill Baird, but he makes the pass. Baird staying down low, Benson going high. Mike Miller also nudging around the inside, and here's a race for the lead as Seneker tries to go around the outside of the 32 car there at Ted Smokestad. That is the Super America entry, and stuck inside now is Reffner.
Although Reffner does have the preferred line, Smokestad moves just enough ahead of him to give Reffner enough space to make the pass and take the lead away from Seneker. So with about 100 laps to go, and Brian had just been, whoa, as he gets a little bit loose coming off turn number 4.
Simultaneous moves going on there now as Reffner takes the lead. He's still trying to find a way around Smokestad's number 32 car, aerodynamically challenged by the lack of a hood.
You got to come up with a new phrase. That was good, but you need a new one. That's your assignment between now and then.
Oh, look at this now. Mike Miller slowing dramatically as Mike Eddy just shot around on the inside there. I'm not sure. It looked like Miller might have let him go.
I think Mike Eddy might have bumped him just enough to get the number 18 unsettled, and it allowed Eddy to make the pass.
Not Mike Eddy.
Well, I mean, it wasn't anything real blatant or intentional, but he had been running behind him for quite a while.
Ralph, got anything to say down there?
Well, most of the leaders got good gas, fuel mileage, and so forth early on, but they all figure they're going to have to stop with one more time before this race is over. They think they probably could go the distance on tires, but they will take tires when they come in for that extra fuel.
Well, we'll be watching and waiting for that and see how the strategies play out here as we continue to watch along with these folks. They're on the edge of their seat. They bought the whole thing. They're only using a little bit. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Josh Duvall. If you ever wanted to be a young racer, it's easy. If you have a question about racing or your favorite driver, write it down on a card and send it to me. We'll have one of our drivers or officials answer for you on the air. If your question is selected, we'll send you a nifty racing hat and t-shirt. So send your questions to Young Racers, P.O. Box 26792, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28221.
There's the 32 car of Ted Smokestad. It was missing a hood a while ago. Rob doesn't like aerodynamically challenged. Well, how about suspension prohibited as he's missing the right front tire?
Okay, as Ted has climbed out of his car and this rookie driver moving around to the right-hand side to take a look. Here's a replay. It was Brian Reffner trying to put a lap on Smokestad. And remember, Smokestad is the one that allowed Reffner to take over the lead, gets into him just a little too hard, and Smokestad into the outside retaining wall. Pops that tire like a grape and does some pretty significant damage to the right front suspension. We'll get another angle from our speed shot off turn number 4 coming up just a second.
Now try to imagine the pucker factor for Bob Seneker. Watch this in the blue 84. Oh, coming right at you. Now a lot of people in the pits right now, and Mike Miller's went up and down, changed the 2 inside tires, got gas and shot back out onto the racetrack. So he's now changed the 2 tires that you said. And here's another look at this. As Reffner just trying to find a way around. Smokestad gets sideways one way, then the other. Reffner hard on the brakes.
And you know, Ted almost saved it. You could see that, Brian. And Reffner did get out of the throttle to allow Ted an opportunity to get the car squared away. He just simply overcorrected, it looked like, which is the natural reflex response. When you feel the tail coming out, the natural reaction is to crank that steering wheel to the right, and that immediately turns that nose to the outside retaining wall. I'm sure Ted's not happy with the result, but pretty interesting incident. Ralph?
Rob, as you guys pointed out, everybody did pit the second half of the field in here now, taking on fuel and tires. So one thing to take note of is that Mike Miller changed left side tires while everybody else changed right side tires. Everybody did get all the fuel that they need to go the distance now, and they'll head back out. Brandon Sperling's car having some problems down in the pit road here, the number 51.
But not everybody, in fact, did pit, Ralph. We see that Mike Eddy, Scott Hansen, Matt Kenseth, and Glenn Allen Jr. all stayed on the racetrack, and they may be in the catbird seat with less than 100 laps to go.
Well, we'll try to answer that question, hypothetically at least. Can the tires go the distance? Will the guys that didn't come in need to do so before the end of this one? We'll find out in a moment. Welcome back, everybody. We're in the final 100 laps of the race. Here is Brian Reffner coming out of the pit area. He was assessed a stop-and-go penalty for the incident with Ted Smokestad, Rod.
Well, it's always a judgment call. The ASA officials apparently feeling that it was maybe a little more aggressive than he needed to be and decided to penalize a second-year driver. We don't think he was penalized a full lap. We're being told it was just a stop-and-go penalty, and if there's any change to that, we'll update you.
After a series of pit stops, things have changed as you might expect, and as you might expect, guess who up front? The black 88. Yeah, Mojo's working again.
But I got to tell you something. Now, with less than 100 laps to go, before this race, I had to submit a column for the ASA Action Line, the publication of ASA, and I predicted Scott Hansen and Glenn Allen Jr., one of the two of them would win the race. Hey, they're in second and fourth right now. Maybe I'll do okay on that.
Well, you do know something about this, apparently.
Well, you don't always seem to think so, but thank you for that little acknowledgement. I appreciate it.
I always think so. I'm just never sure.
Thank you.
There's a very subtle difference there.
And here are now a bunch of cars that did come on pit road, including Pat Bordeaux, who's still on the lead lap. Brad Loney is fast. He's just moving to the bottom to give these guys room because he's 47 laps down. Bob Seneker, Mike Miller, Gary St. Amant all now have to hustle as 90 laps remain. And that may sound like a long time, but if we now would go an extended period under green, these guys have no chance to wait. Now, you can see Johnny Benson got bumped in the back end by, I'm not sure who. I think that's Harold Fair directly behind him. No, that's Jay Sauter, because they are really racing in a tight pack.
A very tight pack. While out in front, Mike Eddy is trying to put some distance between himself and the field. Of course, everybody else would love nothing better than to see another caution come out and close things up a little bit. But at the moment, Mike Eddy outdistancing the bunch. Scott Hansen can't keep up. Glenn Allen Jr. is missing the hood on his race car. That cannot be a good thing. And even though he's running in third spot, is really having trouble closing any ground on the black 88.
And this battle that we're looking at, I believe, is for like 6th, 7th, and 8th positions, and all the way back through about 20th. This last count, we still had 20 cars on the lead lap.
Well, we're showing Bob Seneca in 7th place, so then Gary St. Amant is 1 spot behind him. Pat Bordeaux, Mike Miller, and Johnny Benson Jr., Jay Sauter. That's the cluster starting at about 7th spot with Bob Seneca in the blue 84.
Rick Beebe right behind Jay Sauter in, I think, 10th position. Car number 6 having a good run in that engine armor machine.
Showing Bob Seneca in 6th place now, so that is where that battle is going on behind the leaders, and the leaders being led by Mike Eddy.
Joe Knott has moved into 4th position. He got around Matt Kenseth, and he had a 7th place run at Columbus in the opening run of the season. Look at Benson, and it's apparent that Benson and Mike Miller both have faster cars, a little faster at least, than Pat Bordeaux's BASF rookie machine. But Pat holding his own against these more experienced drivers.
Now there's a good look all alone, and he certainly is all alone on the racetrack right now at Mike Eddy, the 7-time American Speed Association champion, a man who is running neck and neck with his so-called Goodwrench teammate Dale Earnhardt for an unprecedented 8th championship. Why has this man never gone down south? We asked him.
This is the type of racing I do, and I enjoy doing it. And there's more to racing than just driving the car on Sunday for me. I like to work on my own stuff and prepare my own stuff, and I guess I'm just happy doing what I'm doing, and this is what I enjoy doing.
You know, make no bones about it. He has had numerous offers to go drive 4 teams down in NASCAR, but he has steadfastly refused to do it because he is a man that likes to call his own shots and run his own operation. And he's doing exactly what he wants to do, doing it quite well. As we look at this battle now heating up for 2nd position.
Well, like Mike Eddy or not, you certainly have to respect a man doing what he wants to do, and it doesn't matter what that is. If a guy's doing exactly what he wants to do, you got to respect that. I'm doing exactly what I want to do, sitting right here in the booth watching this ASA race.
I don't know if you saw that. Glenn Allen Jr. raised a hand to Scott Hansen to say thank you for giving me racing room. It was these 2 guys who were battling for the win here last year, Brian, when they got into the oil of a car that had lost the engine in it, and they both went crashing into the wall. Now it will be Glenn Allen Jr., who we had maybe written off early in the going with all the damage that he had to this Eaglewood Construction CarQuest Pontiac, and now he will set sail for leader Mike Eddy.
There was a 3rd victim in that very same incident. It was Johnny Benson Jr. all went spiraling into the wall after, I think it was Joe Knott, lost an engine, dropped some oil or some transmission fluid or something they didn't see. Everybody went spiraling away, and racing for the lead last year, that was just one of the many things that made it an exciting event from our point of view anyway. There is Mike Eddy leading on the racetrack. Let's go once again down inside to Ralph Shaheen.
I'm with Howard Thomas, crew chief for Mike Eddy. Howard, you guys stayed out. How much of a gamble is that here at Toledo with 100 to go?
Well, the tire wear is not real bad, so rather than go to the back again, we just took a chance.
And you're okay with your fuel?
Yeah, we can make it with fuel, no problem.
And that's all up to Mike Eddy.
Well, there you heard it from Howard, the crew chief there. Howdy Thomas, of course. A lot of folks call him around here. And they've made a calculated gamble. They think the tires will last, and they know they have enough gas. We'll just have to watch and wait and see. Certainly running hard up front right now. Here's the battle for 5th as Bob Seneca is nudging his way towards the front, taking Gary St. Amant with him. These 2 guys racing pretty hard. We just saw a peek there at the Valvoline hood of the 48 car of Joe Knott. Kidded him earlier about borrowing a hood from Mark Martin, see if his car would go any faster. Fact is, they've got a new sponsor on their race car, the 48 of Joe Knott.
This is that battle for 5th and 6th positions between Bob Seneca, who led for a while earlier, and Gary St. Amant's wins Ford, car number 7, who's just having another consistent run today.
A lot of the veteran drivers and a mix of the young lions still doing battle here in the Glass City 300. Hi there. We'll be right back. How would you like to really be part of the race team? Well, Racing Electronics, the official communications equipment supplier to the American Speed Association, is giving away a unit and Bearcat scanner along with a 1-year racer frequency membership on each ASA telecast on TNN. To enter the drawing, send your name and address on a postcard to Racing Electronics, Box GFS, 8701 Mallard Creek Road, Charlotte, North Carolina, 28262. This week's winner is John Kahn from Muncie, Indiana. Congratulations, John. Enjoy your scanner.
As Glenn Allen chases Mike Eddy, we'd like to extend some prayers and condolences to some folks, some of whom are at home this weekend. Gary Donegan, who's on the Tony Raines team, his dad has been ill. We wish him a speedy recovery. It's been kind of a mixed week for Kent Stauffer. He got a new sponsor this weekend, Popa Joe's Pizza, who he hopes is really going to be a big sponsor for the future. It's a frozen foods and pizza folks and some pocket sandwiches and that kind of thing. We hope they'll have a greater involvement. But Kent also lost one of his best friends, Tim Rule, this weekend in an accident, and our prayers go out to that family. Ray Skillman, who was supposed to race here this weekend, his dad sustained a heart attack. He's not here. And a fellow named Goober, who works on the crew of Bill Baird, his dad passed away, so he wasn't able to join us either. So again, our prayers and condolences to those folks, and those that are ill, we wish them a speedy recovery. And back to ASA Racing.
We mentioned earlier in the broadcast there are a couple of brand new Monte Carlo bodies on the race cars out there, specifically the 6 that you're looking at right here. That's the car of Rick Beebe and also the 4 of Dave Sensiba. Ralph Shaheen down in the infield gives us an update on the new Chevys.
Ryan, if you're wondering why we only have 2 as you're sitting there at home, it's because 5-Star, the company that produces the bodies, has been a little slow in getting them all out to the competitors. With the new Monte Carlos coming out this year, they've been real busy trying to get them made as quickly as they can. The bodies are all made out of fiberglass, so it takes a while for the company to produce them. If you're wondering why only one company produces the bodies, ASA did that on purpose. This way, all the Monte Carlos will look the same, which is great for the manufacturers, and it's great for the competitors. Nobody gets an advantage. And because they're fiberglass, they're a little bit cheaper for the competitors to purchase. Now, a lot of the teams have gotten them. They didn't want to run them at Toledo and Columbus because these are 2 tracks that are notorious for tearing up body panels. We'll probably see a lot more of them at IRP at the next round.
Well, that's Rick Beebe working on the 22 car there. Rick Beebe in the Monte Carlo Chevrolet. His car is looking pretty good. On the other hand, J.D. Summers, who had sat outside in first row, his car cosmetically challenged at the moment as Mike Eddy, the leader in this race, starts to get into the traffic a little bit. As there's Dr. Yale Conley, who was involved earlier in an incident, moving down low. Mike Eddy trying to get around the outside of the racing surgeon from West Virginia. And Yale's giving him a little bit of a run at it there.
Yeah, he is. But the next car to go a lap down is the young man who was leading this race just a few moments ago, Brian Refner. You can see that outside groove is just a little treacherous as Mike tiptoes around the high side of Dr. Conley. Quite a while to make the pass. Glenn Allen trying to use that to his advantage to close. He was narrowing the gap significantly for a while, but it's almost as if Howdy Thomas, crew chief for Mike Eddy, said, look in your rearview mirror, because just as quickly as Glenn was reeling him in, he now is falling back. And I'm wondering if there might not be another problem in the offing for Glenn Allen Jr. He's losing ground to Brad Loney, who's 47 laps down, but is as fast right now as just about anybody on the racetrack.
Well, Brad Loney racing for pride here. Loney as he came into this race, hoping to keep alive a streak of high finishes. He's been in the top 10 in every ASA race since Milwaukee last year. And, of course, he was second 2 weeks ago in Columbus, third in the final race of '94, but that streak, as many of them do, came to an end.
Glenn Allen Jr. well off the pace off turn number 2. Watch that car climb the banking. I think he may have a tire going down. He's trying to nurse it around, hoping for another caution. Let's take a peek as he goes by the start-finish line very, very slowly as he looked to be in a position to challenge for a possible win. And the third-place car of Scott Hansen is right there and about to make the move by.
Yes, Glenn Allen Jr. very tentative in that 15 car now. He's got something that he does not like at all. And let's go down to Ralph Shaheen, the man who knows.
Yeah, it's a flat right front tire, and that's not a lot of fun for anybody. The crew is down here waiting. They got the jack, they got the air guns, and they got a new right front. As soon as little Glenn decides he's had enough.
Well, no doubt, Ralph, he will stay out as long as he possibly can. He'll stay out praying for a yellow if it does not come, and he sees number 88 right behind him. He will definitely bring that machine on pit road. Again, he elects to go past the entrance to pit road, and he'll keep that machine out, again, with his fingers crossed that somebody else will bring out a caution in the next lap or two.
That's the 15 car right there that we're referring to. Glenn Allen Jr. from Grand Rapids, Michigan, in the Eaglewood Construction CarQuest Pontiac. Fingers crossed as he's providing a rolling roadblock for a lot of the traffic, but he's doing a great job of staying in the middle of the track, letting them pick their high side or low side, however they want to go around. Here's Mike Eddy in the 88. We're 47 laps from the finish of this race, and now Mike Eddy running into a little roadblock of his own there with a couple of cars. First Brian Refner, then ahead of him, number 68. So Eddie experiencing his trouble in traffic. Back in second spot right now, Mike Miller has made a brilliant run towards the front after a pit stop to get left side tires. He got around Bob Seneker finally, and he's trying to find the number 88, who's about a quarter lap, maybe a third of a lap ahead of him right now.
And Scott Hansen was second as Glenn Allen has brought it on pit road, and Ralph is there.
The Glenn Allen car goes up in the air. They will change that right front tire, and it looks like they're going to change the right rear as well since they're in. Little slow with the right rear, and as soon as they get the car back down in the off the jack, Glenn Allen Jr. will return.
Here's Mike Miller working on the 48 of Joe Knott now. Showed him a little bit on the low side and now tries to work it around the high side. Seneker, who's behind Mike Miller, had been in front of him, and Miller has gotten around. The pole sitter has been as far down in the standings as 10th when he came in for pits. He's had 2 very fast pit stops and is back out on the track with a very fast race car. Question is, with only 44 laps to go, does he have enough of a fast race car to make up about a third of a lap on Mike Eddy, the race leader?
But it's been a great run for Joe Knott, the youngster from Ohio, now moved to Grand Rapids, has taken the crew chief away from Glenn Allen Jr., Chris Bradley, who previously worked with car number 21, Johnny Benson.
Here's a lap ago as Mike Miller tried to get down on the low side of Joe Knott there, giving him a little smooch on the left inside, and Joe Knott keeping the car together. Mike Miller not able to get by that time. The next time around, he faked low, went high, and made the pass.
It just shows you what a couple of years' experience will do. Joe Knott, the exact same situation that Ted Smokestad was a little bit earlier when Brian Repner was behind him, but not maybe just a few more laps on this racetrack, and he was able to correct without turning that nose into the outside retaining wall.
Ralph Shaheen has another angle on the Mike Miller story. Ralph?
Brian, he's doing a beautiful job of keeping that 18 under control. It's loosening up on him as everybody sets their cars up tight for this racetrack because the track gets slicker as the day goes on. And Mike Miller has really got the rear end hanging out on that car, especially coming off of turn 4. We're seeing a lot of the other drivers suffering the same problem, but it's more and more apparent on the 18.
Well, Mike Miller working on the 93 car there, also the 54. He's made it good on both of those guys, working his way through traffic, trying to find the tail end of the 88. Loose car or not, Mike Miller driving the wheels off this Atlanta Communications Pontiac right now. The pole sitter had a fast car from the very minute it came off the trailer, and he's still got a fast car right here when it counts.
He needs to just pace himself, though, Brian. He'll never catch him. He'll never run him down if we stay green because he's a half lap behind. He can just simply hope for another caution and a shot at him. As a result, he might as well just hang tough in second position and save those right side tires as best he can and hope for that caution.
Well, hoping for a caution is something that doesn't always pay off. These folks here are settling in for what looks like it's going to be a great finish. Maybe we will get a caution, maybe we won't. In any case, we'll be right back. You've got a front row seat for the final 28 laps of the Glass City 300 here. Hope you got your earplugs in, and we are set for a great finish. There's Mike Eddy still working his way through the traffic, and some quarter lap or so behind him, Mike Miller trying to catch him.
He's definitely closing, but I think Eddie may be going easy on the tires at this point. There's the top 5, Mike Eddy, Mike Miller, Joe Knott hanging on to 3rd ahead of Bob Seneker. And look at Glenn Allen after having to make that pit stop. He'd like to make up at least 1 lap. Scott Hansen just lost 6th spot to Rick Beebe, then Gary St. Amant, Steve Holtzhausen, and Dave Sensiba rounding out the top 10.
Well, as you correctly put it, if they stay green, it's going to be very difficult for Mike Miller to make up any ground on Mike Eddy. Here's the battle for 3rd right now as Joe Knott with that brand new hood on his race car, the familiar V of Valvoline, and Bob Seneker, who was passed earlier by Mike Miller for the spot that he's now racing for. 25 laps to go. You see it on your screen. You're watching a race for 3rd, and the 2 cars in front are the 88 of Mike Eddy and the 18 of Mike Miller, the pole sitter.
The guy on the move, though, is the one at the end of that 4-car freight train, Rick Beebe, in car number 6. We've talked about him just periodically. He has run these guys down in the last 5 or 6 laps from about half a straightaway back.
Well, the next guy he's got to work on is Johnny Benson Jr. There you see Beebe trying on the inside. Johnny Benson drifting up just a little bit, but not letting him by. Got loose for just a moment. So now Johnny Benson Jr., the 1993 ASA champion, busying himself with a hard-charging Rick Beebe coming up from behind in his Engine Armor Chevrolet Monte Carlo. We mentioned before, one of only 2 of the new Monte Carlo bodies on the American Speed Association circuit this week.
And Beebe with the crew chief, Dennis Grossnickel, that turned the wrenches for Mike Miller a season ago.
Well, and Dennis Grossnickel, I talked to him beforehand, and he said, you know, kind of a funny thing. He said, well, on the serious side, first of all, we noticed as when we got this race car out on the track that it had a lot more downforce, and we had to stiffen up the springs right away. But he said the funny thing is I went to pick up the car. We got little stops in the trailer so that we know how far to push the car in. So we pushed the car in up to the stops, and I couldn't get the door closed because it's so much longer in the back. I had to go crawl up underneath the car and take the stops off the floor so he could close the door.
Joe Knott, who finished 7th a couple of weeks ago at Columbus, continues to fend off the challenge of Bob Seneker, but not having as much success as Johnny Vincent as he gives way to the rookie Rick Beebe. Now, we call him a rookie because he is, in fact, an ASA rookie, but the driver from Merriam, Kansas has a lot of experience and lots of wins in the Midwest, and a number of them came at I-70 Speedway, a place where we'll go in just a couple of weeks, a track similar in configuration and speed to the Toledo half mile.
We also see in the picture there Jeff Neal in the 75 car, the split fire entry, the Pyro split fire All-City Chevrolet. He is down, however, a lap and in 15th spot according to our scoring right now. So he had some troubles early on that he was not able to fully recover from. Jeff Neal had a great run early in this race, though, coming all the way from 34th to as high as 2nd in the race. We are still looking for a yellow flag. And of course, even if we get it here in the American Speed Association, they will race 5 laps under green. So no matter if we do get a caution late in the race, we will still see a race under green to the checkered flag. Right now, we're still green with Mike Eddy out in front. Joe Knott here trying to hold off Bob Seneker. That is the race for 3rd, as we mentioned before. And there's the leader once again, putting yet another lap on early leader, number 22, J.D. Summers.
And right in front of Mike Eddy is Glenn Allen Jr. He did get one of his laps back just a couple of moments ago. 11 cars is all we're showing now, Brian, on the lead lap. And that's what happens. You know, you get to the midpoint, there's about 25, and 100 laps later, and there's only 11 cars on the lead lap.
Scoring is showing Glenn Allen Jr. in 20th place right now.
Let's take a look at the gap now between leader Mike Eddy. There he is, just out of screen. And where's the 2nd place car? Mike Miller has definitely made up about a quarter of the half lap, or about a quarter of a lap of the half lap that he was behind. But again, he's still going to need that miracle of a final caution flag.
About 3 seconds on the racetrack. And for those of you at home that understand what 3 seconds is an eternity when you're trying to make it up on a guy that's going just about as fast as you are. So Mike Eddy can afford to soft pedal around just a little bit there. Keep an eye about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th car back from him right now. So Mike Miller.
And we've got Rick Miller hard into the wall, and here is exactly what Mike Miller was looking for. Unfortunately, there will be about 5 cars, lap machines, between himself and Mike Eddy, but this may be just the final opportunity that he might need.
Now, these guys aren't related, are they, Rob? You don't know about that, are they? Rick Miller, Mike Miller? Could be some. No, I'm sure they're not.
No, one's from Atlanta, Georgia, and the other one's from Pennsylvania.
I'm always playing the devil's advocate. In fact, they are not related. Rick Miller, one of the 11 rookie drivers that qualified for this race. He is out of Dunbar, Pennsylvania, as we mentioned, in the Extrude Hone Powerflow Chevrolet. He has provided through no particular set of circumstances other than bad luck the opportunity that we have sort of hoped for, not even secretly, and that is to see a race to the checkered flag between 2 cars that are right very close together on the track. Now, there are, I believe, 3 cars in between the leader, Mike Eddy, and fifth on the track, but 2nd place, Mike Miller, right now as we get ready to go back to green here for the tail end of this one.
289 laps of 300 in the record books as the track crew will now go quickly to the scene of Rick Miller's disabled car number 31, an ASA official pulling the hood pins, getting it ready for the lift that it's going to need to get it off the racetrack. If you are new to ASA, we will tell you, or if you're not new, we'll remind you that even if we run the next 5 or 6 laps under caution, we'll stop the lap count at lap 295, and no matter what, Mike Miller will have 5 green flag laps to try to chase down and pass arch rival Mike Eddy.
Oh boy, that will be fun. The excitement is just beginning to mount here. I hope you can feel it at home as we can here in Toledo. So join us in just a moment when we come back. Welcome back, everybody. There is the disabled car of Rick Miller going into the pit on the hook, so to speak. That is what brought out the caution flag. That will close the field up And if this isn't enough excitement for you, tune in to TNN on Sunday, June 25th, 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Central. The AC-Delco Challenge Series presents the Pontiac Excitement 300. We got some Pontiac excitement going on right here among the first and second. And there are some more races on the schedule. That'll be from Brainerd International Raceway in Brainerd, Minnesota, a road course, or alternative drive style, as we call it. And we are back to green flag racing. Now remember, it is Mike Miller in the Toledo 18, 4 spots back. There are 3 cars in between the orange 18 and the black 88. Well, at least there were.
Matt Hutter separating the two, a car painted identically to Glenn Allen Jr.'s. He is 1 lap down, and I think in car number 05. We're showing 11 cars on the lead lap. Mike Eddy, Mike Miller, Joe Knott still runs in 3rd, looking for a career best finish. Bob Seneker, Rick Beebe, and Hutter now moves over. Johnny Benson is 6th, Gary St. Amant 7th, Steve Holtzhausen 8th, Scott Hansen 9th. 10th position is Dave Sensiba, and 11th, the last lead lap car, is car number 1, Jay Sauter.
We're 6 laps from the finish. 1 car separating the 2 leaders. And the leader is Mike Eddy in the black 88 Goodwrench Pontiac. Here's Mike Miller still having a tough time trying to get around that 05 car. Matt Hutter. Hutter not so willing to get out of the way. Now apparently with this, nope, he's still trying to race. And that only benefits Mike Eddy, who's just pedaling along out in front. And here's some stuff on the racetrack. That's some real, genuine, honest-to-goodness debris there laying right on the finish line.
Well, I'll tell you, Brian, if I was Mike Miller's crew chief,
they brought the caution out.
Absolutely, with 5 laps to go, so we will still have 5 laps under green. I think that car number 05, Matt Hutter, finally did move over and allow Mike Miller to go by, which I think was wise, or there might have been a real good conversation after this race.
Let's go down to Ralph Shaheen down in the infield with another look at this.
I talked to Mike Miller's crew chief, and I asked him if they think they have anything for Mike Eddy. He said yes. All they had to do was get rid of the traffic in front of him. Now that they've done that, keep your eyes on turn number 2. Mike is getting off that corner extremely well, and the 18's a rocket down the backstretch. That's where he's going to gun for him. The problem Mike Miller's going to have is coming off of turn number 4 if they race to the checker side by side. His car is extremely loose off of 4, sideways lap after lap, and Mike Eddy is very stable coming off of 4. And when you run into the checkered flag, stable's the way you want to go.
Some nail biting going on down there in the pits of Mike Eddy, of course, Howard Thomas, the veteran crew chief for the 88 Goodwrench car, and Carl Hyland, a rookie crew chief, if you will. This is his first year. And there's an ASA official. That's Jeff Brown there, kicking that piece of whatever it is off the racetrack there. Oh, it must be a piece of exhaust system because it looked like it was hot. And here's a replay of a look at just what that was and where it was lying, right on the finish line as the cars work their way back and forth, trying to keep those tires nice and warmed up. Here comes some stuff right at you, folks. Part of an exhaust system, I would have to guess. Oh, looked like Gary St. Amant just clipped it and sent it on its final path towards the wall.
It looked like brake ducting to me initially, which is just the corrugated material, but the way it bounced and moved, I'm not sure that it was. It looked like something maybe a little heavier than that.
Something metal and something hot.
Wins winning move, what would be your vote? I don't know. I think maybe the pass that Mike Miller made of Joe Knott, that might be my vote.
To put him, I'd have to agree, because it put him in a position to be where he is right now. He was able to move into 2nd place and challenge for the victory in this Glass City 300. I'd have to say the wins winning move would be Mike Miller. Of course, what an icing on the cake it would be if he could also get around and win this race.
Well, we don't cast the deciding vote, but I think we both agree on what our choice might be today.
Well, the only other obvious choice, but you'd have to call it a wins winning non-move, would be Mike Eddy's choice not to go into the pits, which put him in the lead.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Remember when Bob Seneker avoided what looked like sure disaster on the front stretch?
Well, that was a winning move in terms of life preservation anyway. We're back to green, 5 laps to go in this race. The lap counter had said 296. They've cranked it back to 295. That's the way it works in the American Speed Association. As Mike Miller in the orange 18 trying to get around the black 88 of Mike Eddy. A car length or 2 in between them, as you can see, as they hit the line now with 4 laps to go. This is turn 2. Now that's where they had said, where Ralph Shaheen said that Mike Miller's car was better. Here they come to the turn 3-4 area on this asymmetrical racetrack where Ralph Shaheen said that Mike Eddy's car was better. But look at Mike Miller pulling up close to him. A little loose, as you can see. He was a little weavy back there, a little happy in the rear end, as you say.
Catching him is one thing, putting the pressure on is another, getting around him an entirely different matter. And I think that Mike Miller is going to have to use his race car if he intends to get around Mike Eddy. And I don't mean just drive it, I mean use it as a battering ram.
2 laps to go. These two guys have a lot of respect for one another, and it looks as though Mike Eddy, driving along out in front, has maintained the gap between himself and Mike Miller. If anything, Mike Miller runs up close to him in the turns. Mike Eddy a little softer perhaps going on braking, and then he runs back out in front in the straightaway.
White flag, Brian, just half a lap to go, and I think time is out for the pole sitter fast qualifier Mike Miller, who won only once in his ASA career back in the early 80s, but a brilliant run from deep in the field at the midpoint of this race.
And yet another victory for the 7-time American Speed Association champion. So the celebration is in the pit of the Goodwrench Pontiac number 88, and a celebration of a similar sort will certainly be going on in the pit for the Orange 18 of Mike Miller, because after sitting on the pole for the very first time in his career, he has now posted a near career best second place finish. He did win a race in the American Speed Association, but that came some dozen or more years ago. We'll be back in just a little while to talk to all of the competitors that have mattered in this race. You'll meet them when we return here on America's premier short track series. The 1995 AC-Delco Challenge Series on TNN is brought to you in part by Win Oil Company, makers of quality automotive car care products. Remember, when it's wins, it works. By your GM Goodwrench service dealer, we want your business. By Dr. Scholl's Insoles and Inserts, maximum comfort for work shoes and boots. And by Pep Boys Automotive Supercenters. The checkered flag has waved, and it has waved over one more time. Mike Eddy, the 7-time ASA champion, is now 2 for 2 for this 1995 season, and well on his way to what perhaps will be an unprecedented 8th championship in a major stock car series. Let's go down to the infield where Ralph Shaheen will preside over the ceremonies.
You know, I'm amazed with Mike Eddy. Every time I think I know everything there is to know about Mike Eddy, which for me usually isn't a whole lot, but he surprises me sometimes. This is the first time you've won at Toledo, is that true?
Well, it's the first time I've won an ASA race here. It seems like if anything can go wrong, it'll go wrong here. But today, things went pretty flawless for us.
Tell me about the last 5 or so laps. You had Mike Miller behind you. You knew he was strong. Did you know where he was going to try to get you?
Well, you know, we only pitted twice, and we changed the rights on lap 116, so we had pretty near 200 laps on the right, and they were pretty slippery, you know. But I think everybody was in the same shape as I was, and restarting there was just a matter of staying on the bottom and not getting in the gas too hard and getting the car loose off the corner.
All right, we've been searching for 8 championship. We've got 2 wins in a row here. Is this a freight train that's going to be real hard to derail before the season's over?
Well, you know, if it is, it sure wouldn't hurt my feelings. We're just going at it a race at a time and try and get this GM Goodwrench Service Pontiac in the winner's circle each time, or as close as we can, and then maybe that 8th one will come.
I know it wouldn't upset this guy either. Brent Nelson, of course, from AC-Delco. Got to be pretty pleased with this guy today.
Oh, I tell you what, Mike's been here many, many times, and a true champion, and you know, we're so proud to be the sponsor again of the series this year, and then to see our driver win it, it's actually extra special.
All right, one more question for you. We got IRP coming up next, and we haven't had the tour back there in a while. Do you think you have something for them there? Did you do the open test session?
No, I never did the test session. I've raced a lot at Raceway Park, and you know, all of them old racetracks, they never change. They can change the faces, but they're always the same. So we'll just wait and see, but I'd like to make it number 3 down there.
Can't change this guy either. The Polar Bear, one of the toughest competitors on the ASA Tour.
And you know, I just heard something, Brian, that may be a little cause for hope for the rest of the drivers. Maybe Mike Eddy is suffering from severe memory loss. He won an ASA race here back in 1981, but since then he's only finished 4 out of 9. That's probably why he's erased this place from his memory banks.
Hey.
Well, Mike Eddy, nevertheless, has his second victory in 1995 here at Toledo Motor Speedway, 14 years after he won another one that he can't remember. We're going to come back and talk to a lot more folks here, because there are a lot more of them to talk to, and we'll do that right after this commercial break. These folks aren't going anywhere, don't you either. Welcome back to Toledo, everybody, and now we're looking down on the Tomato 18, as I call it, of Mike Miller. Marietta, Georgia driver of the Atlantic Communications Pontiac is the next guest of Mr. Ralph Shaheen.
Well, you know, he was telling us at the beginning of this race that Mike Miller and Dick Trickle had talked earlier in the week. I think you were talking to Steve Kinzer because you spent a lot of time sideways coming off that corner. Was it that tough to drive it?
Well, the car was perfect coming off it, too, but it was a little loose coming off 4. This Wagner-powered Pontiac Grand Prix was close today, but just not quite close enough.
Does that mean that the program is right there? Did all that testing in the wintertime pay off now?
Yeah, I think that we're going to be in pretty good shape. If this is a precursor of things to come, we're going to be all right.
IRP is up next on the schedule. Do you have something for them there too?
Well, we tested and we got going pretty good there. It's going to be very enjoyable.
Tell me about those last 5 laps with Mike. Could you just not get him?
Well, I was just on the restarts. I just couldn't get going. You know, I needed about 30 laps or so, and with the second to last caution there, I just had to get going, but I couldn't.
Angela Montgomery is here with us as well. She's the director of motorsports for the folks at Pontiac. Now, Pontiac's struggling in some of the other stock car series, but here you guys are really owning it. This has got to be great for you.
Yes, Pontiac is very excited about our ASA performance. We've started the season off really strong, and it's just been a great season so far. We hope it'll continue.
Sure, you guys like that money they kick in too, huh?
You bet. Hey, hi, Mom and Dad.
Say hi to Trickle, too. He did wonders for you, too. Mike Miller with a fine second-place finish here today.
That's going to be a very happy, extended Mike Miller clan. Boy, there's lots up there spread all over the country, and they got to be loving life today. We'll be right back. They're handing out the hardware in Toledo at Toledo Speedway for the Glass City 300. There's a look at your top 3. In the center is Mike Eddy, the winner of the race. To the left, Mike Miller, and to the right, Joe Knott. What a terrific run he had in the number 48 car. They're handing out the spoils of victory here. And, of course, part of what we do every week is to vote for the wins winning move. And in spite of our best efforts to give it to Ralph Shaheen for his performance on the dance floor last night, calmer heads have prevailed, and we have awarded it for the very first time, not to a driver, but to a crew, or specifically a crew chief, Howard Thomas, for his decision not to pit when a lot of the other leaders did. That left Mike Eddy out on the racetrack and was never challenged for the victory in this race. So he is now with Ralph Shaheen, our wins winning move victor, Howard Thomas.
Man, and I thought I put out my best performance, too, last night. Oh, well, these are the tires that are on Mike Eddy's car on the left side, and you can see they're pretty much not a whole lot left there. But, Howard, you guys made a great call in keeping Mike Eddy out there. Congratulations. You and the rest of the Goodyear Service Pontiac team did make the winning move of the race. We congratulate you on that. Why did you do that? Is it just Mike, or do you just know the car better?
Well, Mike, you know, he's very smart about his race car. You know, he lives racing, and he understands what's going on, and he knows more than anybody, you know, how hard he's using the tires. And the first set of tires we took off, they looked really good. So we just assumed that we could go all the way.
This team is really on a roll right now. Is this a freight train that's going to be extremely hard to derail, or have you guys just gotten lucky the first 2 races?
Well, you know, there's a lot of luck involved in racing. So, you know, you can call it whatever you want it, but we're on a roll, like you say, and we hope to carry on. We don't want to lose any momentum.
I call it preparation at home with Mike Eddy and good knowledge behind the head of the crew chief, Howard Thomas, here in pit lane. That's what's making the difference on this crew.
Well, they say in a lot of cases, you make your own luck. The harder you work, the luckier you get. And we congratulate our wins winning move winners, the crew of the number 88 GM Goodyear Service Pontiac.
Well, my vote for wins winning move went to our second-time director, Ed Collins, for not missing a thing today.
We have to congratulate Ed Collins for a great job in the truck, along with the rest of our crew. We'll get a chance to thank them even more throughout the course of this year. We want to thank you for sticking around, but we're not done yet, so come on back. America's premier short track series has come to a temporary conclusion, at least here. The second race of the season has ended with Mike Eddy taking the victory over Mike Miller in a hard-fought battle throughout the race. And sort of hidden a little bit, perhaps, behind the battle for first place was a great run by the guy that ended up in third spot. And that would be Joe Knott in the number 48 machine with a brand new hood on there today in the Alan Knott Toyota Raby Ford, and he is now with Ralph Shaheen. Ralph?
Well, he put that Valvoline hood right up in the thick of things, Joe Knott. Way to go today. Is this more a sign of your maturing as a driver, or what Chris Bradley is doing with you as your new crew chief?
I think it's really coming down to Chris Bradley. He's really given me the confidence, and boy, we couldn't have done a better job other than to hire him. You know, he's really got this whole crew working good. Like I said, Alan Knott Motorsports Ray before Thunderbird ran great today. Couldn't be better. Valvoline on the hood for the first race. You know, we're really happy for that. And car was loose, you know, the whole race, and just had to drive around it. We had a spark plug wire burn up halfway through the race, and we did a 2-tire stop and plus changed the spark plug wire and didn't even lose a lap. You know, that says a whole lot for the crew. Really great. And towards the end, we really didn't have anything for second place. We were pretty far behind them, but just wanted to hold off Seneca. You know, he was getting underneath me, and the only thing I could do was just keep him from going there.
Well, you're on the podium. What do you got to do now to move farther up the podium?
Well, just you know, keep racing hard and stay out of trouble. I've got, you know, a couple stickers on my dash that say consistency, and boy, I tell you what, every time I look at that, it means a lot.
Joe Knott, third place here at Toledo.
And Brian, just 22 years of age.
A terrific run for him. Business as usual for the winner of this race, Mike Eddy. He's been there before. A career first pole position for Mike Miller, and the best finish for him in a long, long time. And for Joe Knott, a career best finish for him in third spot. So we had a lot of firsts here today. And there you see the rest of the field. Bob Seneca didn't quite get around Joe Knott. Rick Beebe, what a great run for him from 28th to 5th. And there we have a full field rundown. We hope you are looking at your favorite driver and just where that driver finished. Glenn Allen Jr., look at him all the way down in 20th spot. So certainly coming out of this, Mike Miller will move to second in points, perhaps, considering the misfortune of the others that were ahead of him. Mike Eddy stays out in front of the points battle for the season and for the moment. Here's the rest of the field. 38 cars started the race, and we will run them all down for you.
And as you continue to look at the unofficial results, we will update you unofficially. Mike Eddy will lengthen his points lead to 20 over Mike Miller. Joe Knott vaults to third in the standings. Gary St. Amant will be fourth. Bob Seneca fifth. Sixth, Scott Hansen. Seventh will be Steve Holtzhausen. And Glenn Allen Jr. drops all the way to eighth. Ninth will be, I think, Brian Refner. And in 10th position, car number 33, Brad Loney. So after a great start at Columbus, Loney and Glenn Allen now have to battle back.
Well, the winners of our race here are still basking in the afterglow and receiving the accolades of the crowd, well-wishers, autograph seekers. We want to let you know about our next race, and that's Brainerd. The Brainerd 300 in Brainerd, Minnesota, on the road course up there, alternative drive style, as they say, making rights and lefts. Mostly lefts, however, on that racetrack. No, there are a couple of left turns and a lot of rights. But here is the tail end of the car that ended up winning. So if you can win even when your car looks like that, you're doing a good job. And, of course, Mike Eddy has done a good job for a long time, as have these folks. Our executive producer, John Petrie, and our producer, Joel McKee, and the rest. These are the folks that make it possible for us to bring you such a great broadcast and for us to enjoy the time that we have in the booth together. So for my partner and teammate and good friend Rob Albright up here in the booth, and for Ralph Shaheen down in the pits, for our colleague Josh Duvall, this is Brian Drever saying so long from Toledo.